Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Y'all are brewheads? Yeah, we brewheads. So pour a glass of craft beer, we can do this. Yeah.
What's good, y'all? This is C Certified Brewhead.
And I am Nathan from Nathan Does Beer.
And welcome to episode 196 of Brewing Others, the podcast Adjunct series. Nathaniel, mate.
Yes, indeed. We've got a special one tonight.
We got a banger. It's a beaut. But before we tell you guys and give them the proper intro, we just want to shout something out. So this, by the time you guys see this, it's all this stuff is already out. So our 10th anniversary, everything's out. If you haven't been seeing all the posts and stuff, we have our 10th anniversary event on May 31st at Blood Brothers in Toronto. We have 40 unique collab beers, coffee beans, and obviously the cafe, Found Cafe, that we're doing collab beans with is all over the news across like Australia and things because the Canadian government are trying to make them destroy $8,000 worth of Vegemite. So you mess with our Vegemite, the Prime Minister of Australia commented on it. That's how serious it is. There's legit beef. It's hilarious. A great timing. Found Cafe in Toronto. But yes, and we want to shout this out. So we finally got our anniversary glassware. We have never had glassware in 10 years of doing this damn thing. And we finally got it from Zenon. Shouts to Dan. So we have our 10th anniversary glassware that is going to be available very soon. By the time this episode comes out, actually, I will have the link. It'll be in the description that you can cop and get that shipped out wherever you are in the glorious planet. So keep an eye out for that. And we're going to be drinking one of our collab beers on this pod as well, which is kind of perfect timing. So we love talking about, love talking with breweries. And it's also really fun to be able to tap into people on in different areas of the craft brewing industry, which we do from time to time. Like it's not often enough though.
Yeah, it's a nice treat when we're able to kind of drill in on these other like ingredient specific parts of the business.
Yes, exactly. And this is probably only our second time ever really talking to someone from one of the four key ingredients in beer. We're getting a bit yeasty on you guys tonight. We're doing something that we've only done once, and this is gonna be fun. We're gonna do a deep dive in a bunch of beers that have used different types of yeast and explore that in detail. And I'm looking forward to it. So let's shall we? So folks, let me just get this right. It's always like 27 buttons. It'd be so much better if I had just like one thing and I could just do it. God damn it. Guys, please welcome Nate and Richard of Escarpment Labs in the building. Let's go. Brought the audience for you guys. Welcome, boys. First time on the pod. Great to have you both.
Good to be
Thanks
here.
for having us.
It's awesome. So very excited for this. We have a bunch of fun beers and a bunch of fun stuff to talk about tonight. And we're starting off. This was actually a very happy coincidence that this beer right here, which is our first anniversary release from the 10th anniversary drops. This is our collab with Fairweather Brewing here in Hamilton called Purish, our Kiwi common, which is our little flip on a California common. And it's very cool. And then it was just a fantastic coincidence that Escarpment Labs did the yeast. What a beautiful thing. So, I mean, I guess we could how much involvement did you guys have in this beer when you were talking to Ram about it all?
Functionally, none.
None? Okay.
Fair enough. It's like the movie credits when you see like you wait 2-3 minutes and you see the people behind the scenes that make it all happen. That's really our role in most beers, right?
Exactly.
As the yeast supplier. So we weren't an official collaborator, but Fairweather does use one of our lager strains to make their lager beers. It's actually my favorite lager strain. We call it Beer Garden Lager.
Okay.
Just a classic German lager strain. And I've been drinking a lot of Fairweather beers the last few years because they do a great job with it.
They really do. That's why we pitched them this collab as well, because it was it's such a they do such a great job. Like Donna is one of the best sort of go-to pilsners in not just in Hamilton but in Ontario, I think. So when we pitched them one, when we stepped to all the I guess you guys probably don't know much about this from our side, but we approached all the breweries about doing anniversary. We got about 40 collabs going. This one we came to run with an idea. We came to everyone with an idea, not like, hey man, let's do something. We always pitch something that felt right with them. And we thought a California Common would be a good one. Both love them. And because they do great crispies, we thought it would be a good fit. And I went down, Nate and I have been dividing and conquering because it's the only way to make this work. And I went down, we hung out and we had a chat and we thought, let's do a little flip on it. So they basically lightened up the malt bill a bit. As you can see, this is not as brown or as that you would expect from a Cali Common. And we use Kiwi hops. We use Rawaka and Moteco in the end.
It's a brilliant twist.
Yeah, they nailed it. They weren't even sure if they could pull it off, to be honest. So we had they did it early, so we had enough time to do a backup beer in case this didn't work out. But it's glorious. Like, this head is spectacular. It's great. So, gentlemen, welcome. Great to see you both. Cheers.
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 Cheers. Get that in you. So much like tropical fruit and lime on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
It's really tasty.
On this.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
You got some tropical, but it still comes across as lager too. Like, that's not hidden. It has that je ne sais quoi of lager yeast and lager beer.
Mm-hmm.
It has that nice little sulfur thing still kind of floating through it that kind of tells you, like, this is a lager. This is not a cold ale or anything like that.
Yeah, they like the fact that the yeast and malt bill are still playing out front and center is giving it that hint of like, okay, like this is not some bullshit where we're saying it's like a Cali Common, but I've just chucked a bunch of bold.
Yeah,
like it actually very much does have that vibe about it still, which I quite like.
Yeah. And on paper,
one of the things.
Go on, brother.
So one of the things I always liked about Fairweather, and like, we've been working with those guys since I remember the first time I went in there, they were installing their glycol lines and moving tanks around, and like we've been with them, I think, before they opened technically.
Okay.
All their beers are clean. All their beers are smooth. Like, there aren't any off flavors. There aren't any little bits of diacetyl or DMS or these other flavors that are kind of clouding things out. It's all like, you can taste all the ingredients that are present with intent. There's not this kind of low background flavor that's distracting. Everything is clear. They're always. That's one of the best things I think about makes Fairweather kind of what they are and why they are kind of well renowned.
You're so right.
Yeah, definitely agreed. So in this beer, then, since you guys can speak to it more, like, we were trying to achieve with the actual the typical Cali Common, that real malt forward flavors with a bit of bitterness. And then those sort of brighter New Zealand types, and we thought that they would pair better with a slightly lighter malt bill. What other flavor profiles for this beer that the Beer Garden yeast brings to it?
So for me, like, right up front, you do get. I mean, the technical term is sulfur, but that also can have negative connotations. To me, I would say it's like almost got this like flinty. I don't know how to describe it, like minerally kind of aroma and taste that the yeast really does drive forward. And I find that actually pairs quite well both with the malt, but also with the fruity flavors from hops too. Like, it pairs equally well with more old school floral hops, but it kind of can brighten up those aromatics. Like, I get that, and then I get the tropical fruit from those New Zealand hops as well.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it kind of just gives it a little bit more of a boost, essentially.
I think it adds complexity. Like, lager yeast isn't known for having a huge amount of flavor, but I think what it does do is add complexity and kind of add like elegance to a beer.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, interesting. So that's this is awesome, and once again, happy coincidence that this is how it went down. Like, it's very cool that like this was the yeast that you guys, they worked with you guys for this yeast, and it's fantastic. So this could have gone either way with this beer, but really nailed it. It's a unique thing, and when the good thing about it as well, this is like a little earlier in the game, but we planned all the hoppy beers to drop closer to the event, and this one can dropped earlier. But I like that it'll have, when on canning day, it was so bitter, it was crazy bitter. Then I went back the next day for the photo shoot, and it calmed down a lot. So I think that even over time as well, and I imagine the yeast will play a role in this, it kind of just like mellows out a little bit. And I would say, mellow out would probably be the main word I would use, and just like, and just soften a bit. I don't think the fruit flavors are too much right now, but I don't know if they would be for everybody at its current. It's only been in cans like a week and change.
Yeah.
Does the yeast contribute to that, do you think?
There's a lot of different things that are going on that are changing that. Just to kind of rattle off a few, like whenever we see, whenever you force carb anything, you always see a temporary spike in bitterness. But the going theory is that as things, as you've added a bunch of CO2, you have a little bit of carbonic acid, a little bite, the CO2 turns into carbonic acid. That can help elevate certain bitter compounds, which is in an unpleasant way. Whenever you move or agitate the beer too, that can also knock certain bitter compounds that are reacted with the things to become more expressive, which
Hey.
over time will react and mellow. It's one of the things that people believe lagering does, is as we lager, some of those compounds actually settle out, tame themselves down, so that when you transfer the beer off delicately, that's the important part. You can kind of leave some of the more bitter compounds behind.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. So it's just one of those things. It's just like part of it. And all of those, elements of a beer like this kind of like contribute to that kind of, mellowing is the only word I can think of, like settling.
Yeah. Like I've done this as a little demo with some people where if you take, you can do it with Coke, you can do it like Coca-Cola, like soda.
Just to be clear.
Just to be clear, take 2 cans, put one in the fridge for a week and put the other one, out on the shelf on a table or something like that for that entire week, except for like 2 hours before you're going to drink it. So that when you pour both of them and pour them both into the same glassware and things like that, pour them both, you'll see differences. The one that's been in there for the week, the sweetness is higher, the carbonation is more dissolved, the bubbles are finer. The one that's warm aged functionally, the bubbles are larger, the sweetness is dimmed, some of the other tones are more aggressive. How you handle the beer, the cellaring of it, so to speak, in a brewery is going to have a big impact.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's that actually just reminded me of one of the things I definitely want to touch on tonight is you mentioned the cellaring and all that stuff of beers. And I know Nate, when Escarpment Nate, because we have Escarpment Nate and BAOS Nate. So just to be when we were chatting,
I expect some confusion with that as we got a couple of beers in for sure.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do our best, goddammit. But we were
Especially
talking about
the Tifa.
Oh yeah, especially after that bad boy, it's gonna punch us in the face a little there. But the just a reminder, I'm saying this like now so we all don't forget, just to chat about the like the role that yeast plays in some of the beers that do maybe explode in a can or something like smoothies or whatever it may be. Even though it might not be yeast that's causing it, it's the fruit interacting with the yeast as such, or any other styles and stuff as well, just to maybe get like almost a scientific perspective on that.
It's a fermentation problem. That's us.
Okay, so then we
can answer it.
Okay, let's definitely touch on that in a bit. So, this is great. Love it. Once again, you guys are doing this. It's really nice. I love this beer. This is really, really fantastic. The first question for you guys that have been on the pod for this is your debut pod appearance. How did you both get into craft beer? What was your respective stories on that, and how did that kind of lead? Like, what did your careers look like through the years until Escarpment? And whoever wants to start.
I can take it if you like. I'm going to tell that story for 3 different beers. I got the story. It's 3 parts, 3 beers. It's an evolution.
Oh, let's go.
Number one, 16 years old on a school trip to Germany, came across this funny beer that said hell on it. Bought it because I thought that was funny. That beer was Augustiner Helles. It was bitter as hell at the time, but it left an impression. And now that's one of my top 5 favorite beers.
Love it.
Beer number 2. I'm in the U.S. underage. Fake ID, going to see a show. I have this beer called Bell's Two Hearted. Holy crap, what is this beer? It's amazing. And I become a craft beer fan instantaneously. Number 3, I'm in residence at university, and I'm very much into trying every possible beer, and became known as the coffee beer guy because I was drinking Péché Mortel from Dieu du Ciel. Because you know what? That's a great bang for your buck at the time. And it's delicious. So from that point onward, became a pretty diehard craft beer fan, craft beer person. Eventually got into home brewing and yeast cultivation, and met my business partners Angus and Nate, and here we are.
Okay, I like that.
That's my story.
That's phase 1 of the story. 3 beers.
Yeah.
I don't have 3 beers.
That's okay. You can do as many as you like.
All right. I kind of started with going out. A friend of mine at the time in high school, his dad went to those little brew on premise places. I recently found out it's actually no longer in business, so I think I can now say it. It's Einstein's in Oakville, which was this little place you can vent on premise, brew on premise type thing.
Gotcha.
Went there and helped him package everything up and tried some of the stuff he was making. Like, I actually kind of like this. So me and my friends grew wicked neck beards, all underage, and went there thinking we were convincing them and swindling them to sell us alcohol underage. No, it was totally legal. We just didn't know. And started home brewing there on their system. Ended up going to university at the University of Guelph. Spent way more time home brewing than I did pretty much anything else at the time.
I get it.
Which is a problem. Ended up working for a small little brewery that no longer exists called Grand River Brewing, located in Cambridge, where I started off just in like retail space, doing sales. Hey, here's beer. Here's how you sell beer, things like that. And I started bringing them my homebrew recipes. The next thing you know, I'm leading beer clubs and doing R&D batches for them. We're fixing beers, tinkering with beers, trying to, hey, we want to make the attenuation of this beer a bit more. We have no idea how to do it. At the time in Ontario, there were maybe 15 breweries tops. So
what year was this?
This would have been 2008, 2010.
Okay, OG.
Yeah, it was back then. At the same time as working there, I ended up working at this lab at U of G that, eventually I met my business partners through. That didn't kind of materialize until 2 years later on. Ended up working, so I switching from Grand River, started working at Great Lakes Brewing, where I was there. I don't know what my job title actually was. I was kind of just hired on and did things for them, everything from like helping them do basic lab tests when their lab technician who was threatening to retire at any moment needed help, to working on the packaging line, phoning LCBOs and doing sales calls. I worked wherever was needed. At the same time as there, I was working in agri-college for the brewmaster program. Just kind of got an in on there, being known for helping some breweries fix some micro problems and contamination problems across Ontario. So I started working there, and they offered me a full-time gig, and I've been there now for 13, 14 years. And then about 2 years into working there, I got a phone call from Richard and Angus being, hey, we want to start a thing. I'm like, yes, let's do it. I want to do this. And Escarpment was born.
Amazing.
The three of us cut a sweetheart deal, very beneficial deal between us and Wellington Brewery, a local Guelph brewery, where we trained up a handful of their staff. We helped them go through their big expansion they were going through. And in exchange, we got free room and board. And we were able to use that as a platform to, get our initial growth off the line, get some product in the hands of customers, and get this machine rolling.
Huh. So how does one start a yeast company with zero, like from nothing? Like, how do you just put some sugar water outside and be like fucking yeast, or like how?
Well,
how
we
does
just
it go?
kind of started doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'll fill in the gaps. I'll fill in that story. So I was after my craft beer awakening. I eventually got some skills in yeast cultivation. I went back to Germany, and I also cultivated a love of Germany as well, and German beer. Gained some yeast skills. Came back to the lab. Started home brewing as one does, and started banking all the yeast that I was homebrewing with, because I realized I didn't need to buy it twice. And then Angus, who was another guy who was in this lab at the University of Guelph at the time, started basically offering up my yeast collection to some local breweries. And so we started growing yeast for some of the local breweries like Royal City and Wellington.
Nice.
And basically just trading yeast for beer. And then eventually one of them said, we could probably pay you for this. And we realized all of a sudden, oh shit, we have a business. So very organic. We were really just growing yeast for some of the local breweries. We ended up applying for an incubator program at the University of Guelph and got in and got some real, business advice. And that's basically what led into the scale up efforts with Wellington. We got a little bit of money from the university to buy some equipment and, start producing for some of the breweries that were starting up at the time or already existing. So, there's a bit of a narrative to some of the, drinks we've selected tonight as well, because we've been working with Royal City, Great Lakes, Burdock, some of these breweries for our entire existence, which is, I think, is a really cool story.
That is very cool. I love this, and this I never really thought. This is like when you guys were both explaining this. I'm like, how talk to me like I'm 5 type shit. Like if you were, I had like I don't really even understand. We were talking to Troy. Troy from Badlands, and he gave me his like sourdough recipe because my girlfriend and I were just always interested in doing it. And the way he was like, yeah, you just like make a yeast starter, then you go. I'm like, what the fuck is a yeast starter? I don't really understand. So for those I sort of get it now, but when he was telling me this like last year, and I was just like, dude, like you're gonna have to pull back a little bit. Could you guys just maybe do like the 101 basics on like kind of what yeast is and how it sort of comes to be? And then the other question I always have is how like that is it called is it propagating when you sort of replicate it and you make more? Yep. Maybe just explain that in as like simplistic terms as possible. I'm sure that people are listening and watching who would understand it in a much deeper way, but just maybe it's the easiest way to do it. Just make it as simple as possible. Like how do you make yeast and kind of what is it? And then how do you propagate it to make more of it from a brewing sense, I guess, is probably
okay.
Yeah.
The part I'd start with this is like humans had been, cohabitating with yeast cells for pretty much our entire existence. Like every single place that you've seen humans go, there has been alcohol. Like the relationship between humans and yeast goes back thousands of years. Like this is something that humans have been exposed to for a very, very, very long time. There's some people that argue that we've drunk our way to civilization, and that's it's a great title and it sounds fun, but there's also some validity to it. Yeast is a single-celled organism. Now that sounds really scary and it sounds like it's pathogen, but it's not. There's lots of organisms that we use to ferment things like yogurt, which is lactobacillus that we eat, or hot sauce that we eat all the time. Yeast cells mainly live on fruit on outside. You can find wild yeast, but almost all the yeast that you would find used commercially for a brewery, a winery, distillery, cidery, they're kind of like our dog breeds coming from the wolf. The yeast cells that we use commercially do not represent what you find in the wild for the most part. The gray wolf looks the gray wolf looks very different than the pug. Like
a little bit.
Humans have adapted yeast cells to do the things that we need them to do, and in exchange, they propagate like mad. And we've been using them for our entire existence. This is also why when we start looking at, we don't have some of these examples we don't have here, but the reason why an English ale strain and a Belgian yeast strain and a Hefeweizen strain, the wit strain, the reason these strains taste different is that humans have selected them to be different ways, just like we selected different dog breeds to have different properties. This is the what we call artificial selection, or just selective breeding, is how we've kind of come to all the different yeast cells. When it comes to propagation, that's Richard.
I mean, the cool thing about the thing that I think is cool about microbes is, you start with this tiny thing, right? Like we have in the lab, we might have a petri dish with a few different, colonies. We call them colonies of yeast growing on there. That colony, that little dot on a petri dish, might be millions of cells already because these things are so tiny. And so 150 years ago, some smart guy came up with a way to purify yeast. He was solving a beer problem at the time. It was a guy at Carlsberg. So like the basics of microbiology that we then use to solve all sorts of disease and save human lives, that actually started with making beer better, as many technologies have started with making beer better. We have the pH scale because another guy at Carlsberg was trying to make beer better.
No way.
All sorts of things.
Pasteurization comes from
pasteurization because some guy was trying to make beer better. Also, which also probably saved countless lives. So that's kind of cool. Microbiology itself is a result of trying to make beer better, and we've been using those tools for a long time ever since. So we can start with a single colony of yeast. The cool thing about that is that colony comes from one cell, just reproduces itself over and over and over again. So you get something that's pure. And we can take that one colony of yeast, we can grow it in a little bit of wort, a little bit of sugar and water and nutrients, and that multiplies. And then we can just keep repeating that multiplication process over and over again exponentially. And then all of a sudden you've got thousands of liters of yeast culture that you can concentrate and harvest and ship to breweries. And that's the broad strokes of what we do. We in as many words, we're still learning things 10 years in. There's a limitless number of things that you can learn about improving this process, but at its basic, it's, feed the yeast food. It grows exponentially. Keep feeding it until you hit the point where it makes sense to stop, and then harvest it, and it goes into the beer, and the brewer can also then harvest it and reuse it in the beer.
Amazing. So that's I like that. So I'm writing down "Feed the Yeast Food." I love that. It's a great name. Potential episode.
Yeah. The one thing I always find some people have a hard time wrapping their head around is that yeast is a living organism. It's not an ingredient. It's not like lactic acid or anything like that. It literally is a living organism that needs food. It needs energy in order to survive. If you're mean to it, it won't perform or act well. Like if you don't take care of it, it won't take care of you. If you don't understand how to take care of the yeast, kind of like what Troy at Thailand was showing you. If you don't know how to take care of the thing, it's not going to perform and do what you want it to do.
I like that. You mentioned purifying the yeast, the gentleman at Carlsberg 150 years ago. What does that mean?
So back before that, any yeast culture, we had yeast. Brewers knew that taking the foam from one batch of beer and putting it in the next beer made it ferment. We figured that out about 2,000 years ago. That was pretty early.
When you say the foam, is that like the krausen on top? Like that
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. We figured that out a long time ago. We didn't know what it was until 300 years ago, 400 years ago, when a Dutch guy invented the microscope. We didn't know it was alive until later on, when another smart guy figured that out. But we knew it was important. But before microbiology and being able to purify individual strains of yeast, we would always have mixed cultures. So you can think of it like a sourdough, right, where you have multiple different yeasts and bacteria in there. In the case of beer, a lot of the time it was fairly clean. There wasn't that much bacteria, but you would have a mixed culture that was kind of like the house culture of most breweries. And so, of course, different breweries would share, and that's how a lot of yeast cultures developed over time in historical breweries, and that's probably how we got this, different families of yeast that we can associate with, Belgian brewing and British brewing, German brewing, etc. But at the time, they would have been mixed cultures. And so that was the big technological revolution 150 years ago, was being able to clean that up and use a single strain of yeast to get more predictable results, because that was the problem they were trying to solve at the time. Was it changes, it's inconsistent. How do we make this consistent? And they did solve that problem. I think we lost some things in that process. I'm certain we lost some really interesting yeasts because this new, easier method came along. But at the end of the day, it did make beer better. It made beer more scalable and able to be produced and reproduced in a lot farther and wider places. And that's how we got, beer all over the world.
Okay. So, this is fascinating. So then you mentioned that because it was a mixed culture, that means everywhere you went, it was inconsistent. So therefore there was no, like, as we know it today, Belgian beer. There was beer made in Belgium, but it wasn't like, the candy sugar and all that. And then Germany, it wasn't the crispy. Is that an accurate take? Yeah.
You would have had similar flavor profiles.
Okay.
Just because people would have shared their yeast. Like this is
gotcha.
You can talk to some of these old English breweries that have been using, similar strains or the same strain for 300 or 400 years. They'll say, a brewery down the road had a fire and they lost their yeast culture during that, so we gave them ours. Or, they all kind of change. But the most important thing one of the important things to note here is that the yeast cultures will change and develop within a facility. So, the brewer kind of just like, you've seen certain dog breeds change over the last 30, 40 years because people have bred them certain ways. If a brewer is using a certain yeast strain and they're breeding it, or they're repitching it every single week, every 2 weeks, they can select for certain things. They can make it drier. They can make it more estery. They can make it more expressive or less expressive. They can change it, modulate it as they see fit, or just what happens by happenstance. Some breweries, this happen to them without any intent. It's just the yeast cells went this way.
It's
Right.
constantly like Nate said, it's a living organism. It's constantly evolving. The reason the yeast that we use and that's so successful in human industries, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, is so successful is because it evolves quickly. It's really flexible. You know, it'll evolve to its environment. It'll adapt to its environment, and so it can figure out how to make wine. It can figure out how to make bread. It can figure out how to make beer really well and evolve fast. And it's still, you know, if you use it in a brewery continuously without going back to a lab, it's going to constantly evolve and change.
Right, which is obviously not what they wanted when you're talking about scalability at a place like Carlsberg,
Yeah.
for example. Okay.
Yeah,
So then
exactly. Yeah.
if and Europe's probably the best way because you got, yeah, like you said, the British, the Belgian, the German are probably three of the most like easiest. Everyone knows those examples. So whatever, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, whatever it is, like they got their shit. This dude figures it out, and you're like, all right. So how does Belgium? I think is a more interesting example because they've got a very distinct. And obviously, there's different styles, and
probably the most distinctive.
I think so. You can drink any beer
say.
blindfolded, and almost every time you're going to know it's Belgian. It doesn't really, you know, it's not shy.
Yeah.
So even though within Belgium, you got Belgian beers, you've got quite a breadth of styles within that, like, you know, very numerous. How would they have gone, like high level, gone about like being like, oh, we like the candy sugar and the esters and the phenols and all that stuff? Like, how did like maybe potentially a country be like, I want that. Like, I want to pull that out of it. And then I guess Germany would have done the same thing. Or now we need this shit clean. We're trying to make, you know what I mean?
I'm going to answer the question, but I want to flip it around a little bit. So if you look at some of the cities of brewing prominence in the past, typically cities that had moderate to hard water, like rather high alkalinity, like, you know, like somewhere like a Kitchener-Waterloo Guelph territory, somewhere that's not Niagara or Toronto. Those are typically the cities of brewing prominence. So the reason for that was that this is before, you know, the invention of lightly kilned barley was existed. Like there were indirect fire kilns where you didn't have roasty particulate in your grain didn't exist. And when you roast the grains a little bit, it actually acidifies the grain. So if you go to Pilsen and you use roasted barley or accidentally roasted barley in that beer, the beer's going to taste awful. Absolutely awful. But if you then take those grains and you move it to, say, Munich or Dublin or London, where you have some of this harder water, the ashy characteristics or this acidity from the roasted grains completely is neutralized by the water profile. So the grain technology of the day allowed for, you know, these cities of brewing prominence to come about. That's kind of what you see with some of these, like, you know, why did these characteristics or why did these cities have beer made this way? It's a little bit of what people wanted, but it's also a lot of like what ingredients that they have access to. Like if you start making beers with a large amount of wheat or oats or rye or, you know, things like that, and you're like for Belgian beers, and you're not using that type of yeast, it's not going to taste as good.
Right. So it's the yeast was almost determined by the other factors in the environment, then, such as the
what
water,
people wanted.
What people wanted based on what tasted good. Because at the end of the day, the one thing you kind of can't change, well, you can, but like that kind of maybe back then they didn't have all the fucking water chemistry shit, but like the basic water profile of anything is going to dictate where that kind of went. Particularly because back in the time, would it be fair to say that at that time they didn't really do water treatment or anything like that?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so therefore it really was dictated by that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So if you look at Munich's actually kind of a fascinating little like microcosm of this. So Munich was like a big trade city, a big trade area. And they have rather hard water that's there. And at first that city became known for the Munich Dunkel, so a dark lager. And then, you know, lighter colored grains became available with Pilsen, and Pilsen started gaining prominence. And then because of that, you know, you started seeing lighter grains become available in Munich. But if they use those lighter grains, the beer would become astringent because the water profile is all wacky. So they invented acid malt and then and sour goots and things that's trying to acidify their water profile. And now we have the Munich Helles that comes from Munich. So like the tech just changed what styles were available, what was the kind of prominent styles at the time.
I think that's exactly it. You know, the technology ends up determining what's the hot thing and what works, right? And in the past, it was really what works, you know, with the malting technology. That's going to determine what cities can make really good beer, and then the malting technology changes, and that changes what cities can make good beer. That has also informed what yeast has ended up being dominant. Where I think there are some cultural factors too, like even some stuff that's still a bit mysterious. Like one of the interesting things that I've noticed is, if you think about Belgium, those yeast profiles, those beers are very different. They have the phenolic, spicy character.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about pretty much any other brewing culture in the world, that characteristic is not a positive. Like the Germans, the Germans in classic German fashion, they've called this, and they've made this the industry standard term, puff. Phenolic off flavor. It is puff. It is not acceptable. So.
Right.
It's so flavor. The flavor of yeast is also very culturally defined too. I think it just comes down to like what became popular and available on industrial scale and when. It does seem like the Belgian brewing is a little bit more influenced by winemaking, where you do have these phenol producing yeasts, and in fact, if you look at the genetics of the yeasts that they use to make Belgian beers, those are also, they have little bits and pieces of wine yeast in there. So you can really see these, human preferences and migration patterns and trends and cultural artifacts in the, the evolution of the yeast itself.
Okay, that's fascinating. I hadn't really thought about like that side of things, because I guess obviously arguably the wine side, particularly in Europe, would have been around a lot longer than the beer. Is that yeah? Okay. Which I never really think of Belgium as a wine region, but or maybe not.
Arguable, actually. Yeah,
arguable. Yeah,
it depends what you classify as beer and what you classify as wine too.
Good point, because I'm sure it's evolved significantly over the years.
The main thing is anywhere where you can grow grapes, wine was the dominant beverage because it is so much easier to make.
Yeah,
than beer.
It's way less work. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sorry,
winemakers.
You don't have to.
It's so much.
You don't have
easier.
to malt. You don't have to malt the grains. You don't have to store them. You don't have to hold them. You can do all your harvest in one time of the year. You put it in containers and you drink it for the rest of the year. For beer, you have to go through the grain. You have to grow grains, which is a bit more laborious. There's a bit more spikes and things like that on the actual sheaths of the grains. You just want to get like irritation and stuff like that. You don't have to harvest it all. You have to malt it. So you have to historically bring it to the river, put the grain in the river for a while, take it out, let it drain, and do that a few times.
Wow.
It is a much more difficult thing to make. There's that old school Roman line, because the Roman Empire obviously between so stratified. This is all across Europe, where below this line they drink wine in the Roman Empire, and above this line they drink beer in the Roman Empire. And it's just
that. What was that determined? What determined that?
Climate.
Just climate. Oh, of course, because it grows grapes. You're going to make wine. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting. I never thought of it as being. I always thought wine was way more of a pain in the ass, but I guess now you put it like that.
They pretend it is.
If you look at high end wine versus commodity beer, you're gonna, the wine's gonna be more finicky and more of an art form for it. But if you're looking for table wine, it's pretty simple.
Okay, I love that. This has been great. This is I never even thought about these questions and going down that little rabbit hole before we started this. This is I feel like we didn't do that when we had Colin from the Labo. People should definitely check that out, because that's something we're going to talk about as well. That was from a bit of a different perspective. So,
it was. It's still very interesting, but yeah, a different perspective entirely. It really digging deep on the yeast stuff is when you kind of realize how much chemistry goes into beer.
That's crazy.
There's one other thing I wanted to mention is as we're kind of just talking about different areas for beer, yeast, and fermentation. And that's, I'm sure you guys know what the Reinheitsgebot is, the German beer purity law.
Yes, sir.
One of the big things and this is, we don't have time machines. We can't go back in time and then ask the yeast questions. There's two impossibilities there, but we can make inferences. We can make assumptions. One of the biggest things that the Reinheitsgebot did is it said you couldn't brew when it was warm outside. It restricted temperature range for it.
Okay.
And if you look at most Saccharomyces, most ale yeasts that are present, the fermentation temperature ranges that the Reinheitsgebot allowed were below what it could ferment. So the yeast cells kind of had this adaptability issue where The humans are saying you have to ferment cold, but the yeast cells can't necessarily ferment cold. Kolsch's kind of adapted to this their own way, but we believe this is actually what caused lager yeast to exist. Like lager yeast is a hybridization of a strain called Ubianus, Saccharomyces ubianus, and Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Ubianus is cold tolerant, but can't ferment certain sugars, or we believe it can't ferment certain sugars. That one's been contested. And cerevisiae can ferment all the sugars, but just can't ferment the cold. Can't ferment while it's cold. So these two hybridize, they breed together, and they solve each other's problems. And this is where we get our lager yeast characteristics, or all the different types of lager yeast that we see today. It all comes from this kind of selective pressure, or this condition that humans place on fermentation. So like humans can have a really big impact as to what even is just allowed to survive and thrive.
Yeah,
right.
And like a key point there is that if you look at beer globally, that's not lager is more than 90% of beer globally. So that success is a product of German stubbornness 500 years ago.
So then that to infer that you are saying that prior to all of that, all beer was an ale until they did the cold and the Reinheitsgebot came about in 1516.
Absolutely.
Interesting. And then that's why the British stuff is all mostly ales and milds and low ABV and cask fermented and all that bullshit. Well, not bullshit. I love
everywhere but Germany.
Everywhere but Germany. They were like, nah, bro.
And yet we wouldn't have had what ended up being successful was the Pilsner globally, right? We wouldn't have had that without the Brits. They were the first to invent kilning without smoke and making light kiln malts. Like that was British technology that some smart, Czech brewer discovered and said, "Oh, what if we brewer and Germans? What if we copy that?" And then the Pilsner was invented, and the rest is history.
Otherwise, so you're saying that everything prior to that was smoky, was a smoked beer?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, ew. Okay.
Not smoke. Full disclosure, I'm a huge fan of craft beers. I'm think less of me if you want.
No, it's fine.
But not. It wouldn't have been smoky necessarily in that regard. It would have been whatever smoke they were working with, and it wouldn't necessarily been as intense. It would have been a little bit less. It could be
ashy tobacco,
or even whatever they had on hand to create fire that produce heat to dry the malt out.
Yeah.
As opposed to
so it's a bit of like unintentional smoking.
Right, but not in the campfire bacon way that the Rouse beers are.
Correct.
Gotcha. And by the way, I like the light, like Godspeed. The way that Luke does it is like perfect for. I believe I could speak for BAOS Nate, and I like that the way that he does that is like just the right amount. But obviously, yeah, I feel like I haven't had what's that one that starts with A Schlenker.
Schlenker. It looks like it has a scroll as a label.
I haven't had it in a long time, but I'd be down to try it again. So I feel like when I first tried it, my palate was not prepared for that, and you probably just like campfire bacon not happening, and then you don't really get into it too much. But I'd be down.
On the topic of yeast, Schlenkerla makes a Helles, which is not smoked, but they use the yeast from the smoked beer. So the only smoke carryover is the yeast, and it's just ever so slightly smoky. It's really nice.
Okay.
So if you see the Schlenkerla Helles, that's worth checking out.
Grab that. Okay. I definitely need to do that.
Might
all right, beautiful. Yeah, seriously. So on that, I'm looking at the time. How you boys feel about next one?
Let's do it.
I think this is the longest we've gone.
I think we've covered the history.
Year.
We really covered the history of beer. So yeah,
I think we really did. We've never done that here before, so I appreciate you guys.
Hey, it's what we do.
It does frame yeast. The history of yeast is the history of beer. The present of yeast is also the history of beer. So.
One final note on Act Schlenker. One of the funniest things I've ever done is I had a room full of 30 beer students, and I gave them all that beer, and I waited. Like we all got the beer in front of us, and we all smelled it at the same time, and then taste it, and just seeing the variety of reactions to that product in a single room is priceless.
Is there any like consensus, or is it a bit of pretty?
Oh no, it's very divisive. It's very divisive. Some people absolutely love it and go nuts for it, and other people like, this is bacon, I hate it.
Well, I love that. That's fun. You got me amped to try that again. So we're making a bit of a different vibe now. So this is another beer, like you mentioned, Royal City in Guelph, who are also participating in our in our anniversary beers, which is
Yeah.
sick. Because big fan of Cam and Dan and the team down there, they're killing it. And this is a glorious double IPA, Luminance. When I say Luminance, what am I special? Now this one, Women's Day beer. Okay. And this is an actual collab with
Yes,
with
an
Escarpment.
official Escarpment Labs collab.
Love that.
Got it.
So I was
Logo
looking
is
at the
on
back.
the can.
I didn't notice. I was looking at the back, but they're beautiful. Guys, tell us about this one.
Yeah, so this is a collab for International Women's Day, and it features all of the Pink Boots ingredients that they could get. So Pink Boots Society is a organization that specifically is intended to provide community and empowerment for women and non-binary individuals in the brewing industry, which I think is really important as a underrepresented group. Pink Boots has been around for a long time. We've been looking for ways to help partner with them and support them. And so opportunity came to offer a official Pink Boots yeast through Pink Boots Canada and Pink Boots Society, which sort of follows suit with the existence of, there's a Pink Boots malt put out by Country Malt Group. There's a Pink Boots hop blend put out by Yakima Chief Hops.
Yeah.
So we thought, okay, well, there's a malt and a hops. Why isn't there a yeast? So Shelly Burns, who's our sales account manager, she, a lot of people know her. She's a legend. She's been around for forever. Yep. Had this brilliant idea of launching a Pink Boots yeast. So came to me saying, hey, I want to do this. What do you think we can do from our strain bank? What do you think would work? And I thought, well, I know the Pink Boots collabs do tend to be a number of different beer styles. I've seen all sorts of things, right? The whole point is to offer some, creative platforms. So I didn't want to pick anything that would be, one note, right? Like just a hazy strain or just a Belgian strain or something like that. So what we ended up selecting for the Pink Boots yeast that brewers can use is, it's actually a Kolsch strain, but it's a less common Kolsch strain. It's kind of from our back catalog. And what's cool about this Kolsch strain is, I did a little bit of screening experiments just to look for strains that can make nice IPAs, and discovered this strain actually works really great in IPAs and hazy IPAs. It really pushes a nice citrusy aroma, but yet it also makes a great Kolsch. It makes, great blonde ales, just a super, super versatile strain. So we picked that strain to offer as the Pink Boots yeast that, can help to be used with some of those other Pink Boots ingredients for these brews. The other cool thing is that all of the vendors that are offering Pink Boots ingredients are donating back to Pink Boots Society. So we give 15% of revenue from all Pink Boots yeast sales right back to Pink Boots Society to support their scholarships and education efforts.
Love that. Very cool, man. I'm excited to try this. This is murky as hell.
Yeah, it is.
Totally.
The yeast is we call that haze positive. The yeast is pretty good at holding that haze.
That could be the episode name. Cheers, gentlemen. Get that.
Cheers.
Hell yeah. That's wicked.
Mm-hmm.
Haze positive. What a sick. I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
Well, we'll say about Royal City, right around the corner from us, like super close. Like we've worked together since the start. I worked there before Escarpment started too. So they have Cam and the gang have a really special place in my heart.
That's amazing. Fun fact, do you know Dan, obviously?
Of course. Yeah.
So I worked at Beer Market in 2011, and Dan was my manager. Dan hired me, and he was like one of the best. I always hey, I'm not a good. I own my own business. I'm not good with authority. But Dan was like the coolest manager ever. Like he was just so chill. And when I heard that he was at Royal City, I was like, yes. And I hadn't seen him. We had him on the pod, and I was like, I hadn't seen him in years. It was very cool. So I love hearing that. And Cam's always been such a gem. Such good cats, man. So very happy to hear that you guys are around that. Okay, so what makes the Escarpment Pink Boots yeast different from some of your other strains? Like how did that come about? As much as you could explain it for the noobs like us.
Yeah, I mean, again, the goal is to try to offer something versatile. So, and I don't want everyone making the exact same beer. It's nice to have some flexibility and allow brewers to get creative with those Pink Boots ingredients.
Yes.
So the thing that I thought was cool is like you wouldn't think of using a Kolsch yeast in a hazy IPA necessarily,
No.
but it turns out
No,
that this one's
certainly not.
actually really, really good at it. I mean, I'm drinking the beer right now, and it's like, for me anyway, my tasting notes is like just tangerine, orange juice, like, you know, really strong citrus. That I think this strain does a really good job of. Yet if you put it in a, you know, in a Kolsch, it's gonna be a lot more subtle, still have those, you know, fruity notes, white wine. But the versatility to me is a really cool thing about that strain. And, you know, the stories we've been getting back from brewers using it, like this just launched in January, but people are repitching it and they're trying it out in other styles. And it's like, it's really cool to see that going. And it's not just like a, you know, Women's Day thing. It's actually something that people are picking up and using in other beers, you know, throughout the whole year, which is, you know, pretty awesome to see.
That's pretty wild that it can be that versatile to be able to be used in that kind of wide a range of styles. Can you explain what you meant by the yeast being haze positive? Like what makes a yeast haze positive?
Yeah, we still don't know fully. There's been some research that we've done and other yeast labs like Omega have done. But some yeast strains can just make a hazy beer more stable. So most of the haze does come from the malt and the hops interacting with each other. So the malt has protein. The hops have these things called polyphenols. These compounds. They tend to like bond to each other, and that's what creates the haze in hazy IPAs. But what we know is some yeasts will help make that more stable than other yeasts. So some yeasts will, you know, make it look like this for months, whereas others it might get, you know, chunky or go clear. What we know is that there's actually proteins that the yeast, you know, has on the outside of the cells that seem to stabilize that haze. And so some strains do that, some don't. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't make a hazy beer with a non-haze pot, like a haze neutral yeast, but it's easier to make a hazy beer with a haze, what we call a haze positive yeast. And there's not that many, to be honest. Like most strains are what we call haze neutral. So it's always nice to find the ones that are haze positive, because that's, you know, it's one of the big technical challenges of making hazy IPA is you can, you know, do everything right and it still ends up dropping out. And that's a big frustration for brewers. So we're always looking for ways to help them make that easier.
And the haze it's not just a visual thing. The haze actually allows for certain essential oils and compounds to, you know, dissolve inside a solution more efficiently than you'd see otherwise in a clear beer. The haze also gives you more body and mouthfeel, and also just from a consumer perspective, like a beer drinker's perspective, if you gave someone a New England IPA and it's not hazy, it's a dead ringer for something's wrong.
Yeah.
Even if the beer tastes awesome. Just a visual indicator that from a quality standpoint from the brewers, having haze is crucial.
I mean, you guys have been a big part of, I think, promoting hazy IPA over time. So you know, right?
Aggressively, yeah. It's our thing. But at the same token, you mentioned Bell's Two Hearted, which like we get moist for that. So I mean, like I feel like everything has its place. Sorry.
Oh,
Nate.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
I was just, I was just going to say, like, and like you were saying, even if it tastes awesome, it's one of those things, like, you know, we've heard this over and over again. Like you taste first with, you definitely hear that you taste first with your nose, but also you taste first with your eyes. Like the aroma, obviously plays a huge impact, but especially with hazy IPAs, you're definitely the first thing that you're tasting is with your eyes.
Exactly.
And you're definitely predisposed to to have a positive or negative inclination to it based on the appearance, and perfectly evidenced by when we first poured this, just how we were saying just look at the milky haze in that. We were already positively disposed to it because of that. So there's real value in that, to be sure. Even no matter how good it tastes, if if this had been just kind of like an orange cloudy thing, I already would have been a little bit meh on it just kind of going in.
Exactly. You know, we were saying before, we taste first with our eyes, and I would also say we make assumptions about the product before with our eyes first. Like if
100%.
this beer if the beer tasted like it does, but it doesn't, but it looked clear, we would go like, oh, that's surprisingly positive. That's it. It wouldn't be like, oh, it's excellent. It'd just be like, I'm surprised. It's better than it completely sets the bar. The haze is completely important. Like we've had clients who switch yeast strains strictly for haze stability.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Like
which makes sense because there's so many. We've talked about this here at nauseum, but if it's going to be advertised as a hazy IPA, and I know there's a scale, obviously, as far as some people like their haze. Like I was talking to Jeff from town, their square wheels is a little bit on the lighter thing. It's not supposed to be murky. It's supposed to be something that you can have 5 of if you want, and you'd be good, and you won't feel as full. Something like this is BAOS Nate and my go-to. Like this, like. As Nate alluded to, we poured this, like, fuck yeah, this is the vibe. I really do like Royal City's haze. Actually, I feel like they don't get enough. Like Goldie, their other pale ale, is fantastic as well. I think they do a great job.
Matt's killing it, and I think this is a really strong example too. I mean, don't drink 5 of these because it's 8%, but people don't necessarily talk about them as a haze brewery, but 8%. Yeah, I think they do a great. I mean, they do a great job. I think they do just a good job of making everything well, and I really appreciate that in a brewery.
No question. Yeah. I love Royal City so much. I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah, they're great.
There's a handful of breweries in Ontario that I don't think get enough respect or enough clout for them. Royal City is absolutely one of them.
Big facts.
And I think it's just because they're it's location. They're you can't find them everywhere. But there are people who kind of hype them up. Like there isn't that this might sound heretical, but I remember the first time I ever had Hetty's Hopper. I remember I was hyping this thing up for myself for like 2 weeks, and I knew someone was going to Vermont and bringing it back to me, and I was like, it was canned 2 days previously and kept in a cooler the entire time, and I got it, and I'm like, it's gonna be awesome, and it was okay.
What year was this?
This would have been 2017, 2016.
Okay, so you were probably too deep in the. Did you pour it or did you drink it from the can?
Oh, I drank it from the can.
Okay, and it was more just because you'd probably had haze by that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had it, and it's also I had built this whole thing up for myself. But I feel like there's kind of a two-way streak on that. I've had some going back to some of the sensory classes I've run. I've gotten some of those like white whale beers for people, and given them to people and not told them that it is. And ask them for their real opinions of the thing, and it's always just, it's good. It's not, the angels aren't singing, the skies aren't opening up. But I've also given some people like some local beers that they have, I've given them side by side, and they've loved the local beer more than this white whale. And I feel like Royal City is one of these breweries where it's like they're this local brewery that does way better stuff than we give them credit for, but people aren't willing to kind of give them, show them the love.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Crispies are amazing. I think their haze, they don't do a lot of it, but when they do it, they deliver. Yeah,
I think this beer would do really, really well in competition.
I can see that
as an occasional judge. Yeah, it's nice.
No, this is a fantastic example of the style, though. So then, when it comes to speaking of what I was saying before about the haze and the breweries doing them at different levels, so if a brewery has attempted to make haze and the haze didn't stick, is that typically a yeast problem, or is that what is causing that for the most part?
It can
or is
be
that
a whole bunch of different stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I will say that the two top reasons. One is unfortunately not enough dry hopping. You actually have to use a pretty high dry hopping rate to get
with T90s too, right? Because the vegetal matter is important.
Yeah, it's the polyphenols, exactly.
Gotcha.
So dry hopping rate, like that's kind of number one. Like, I do talk to people. I mean, I think we've mostly got it figured out, but every so often, especially in Europe, I talk to someone about, haze, and I find out the dry hopping rate is just too low. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but you do have to use more. It's not an efficient beer to make. And then number two is the yeast. Yeah, no, it's not. Number two is the yeast, and it can go either way. Like, you can have a healthy haze positive yeast that's going to help protect that haze. But if you have a yeast, even a haze positive yeast that's stressed out, that's super negative to the haze, because yeast that's stressed out, it's going to start, looking for nutrients to keep itself alive. And so it's going to actually release enzymes that'll break down other proteases. And so that's what will destroy a haze. That's what will make a beer go clear or chunky. So you ever had a beer that's gone chunky? That's probably what's happened. Is the yeast has got stressed out and broke that down.
When you say chunky, what do you mean?
Like
the
you pour a
bottom?
beer out and it's not like this. It's like you actually see like chunks floating around.
Like the pulp is separating in orange juice.
Gotcha. The floaties. Okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of haze has the yeast can join, like hang out at the bottom there, which doesn't bother me. But the ones where it's like floaties.
No, I think it's like I'm not going to name names, but
I know what we're talking about.
But the one that's famous in Ontario for for pouring out and looking like a fucking snow globe.
Yes,
it's fine. It's fine. We love you, Seb. It's fine.
Yeah, hey Seb.
You're famous for
it. And they figured it out. Like they've absolutely figured it out. And that was a situation where I think they were adding pectin and other stuff to it as well, or they're indirectly adding pectin from fruits, which is a whole other third category of haze creation on it.
And there's some beers where my understanding is that the consumers actually want that. So it really is just don't yuck someone's yum, right?
There was that.
That's very Seth Rogen of you.
It does have its fanboys for sure.
Yeah.
There was that soda in the late '90s, early 2000s called Orbeez that had all the small little like gummy balls. And whenever I think of beers like that, it's Orbeez.
I'm looking that up. It's like almost like boba tea.
Those.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Jesus.
That's whenever I think of hazies that has stuff that it's just Orbeez.
That's so funny. What was it made from? Was that like a?
I think it was just tapioca. I could be wrong on that, but it was.
Okay,
it was
so it was boba. Okay.
So
maybe it was gross. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was good. I remember having it as a kid and thinking it was great, or a young teenager, or whatever it is.
If I was a kid, I'd be amped for this for sure.
Yeah. The last thing for haze though is that it is a bit of a Goldilocks effect. Like if you add too much, it can start being negative. And you'll also see certain hops and certain malts that provide increases or decreases in haze positive. Like Galaxy is known for being a very haze positive hop when you use it in dry hop. Other hops not. They're really just certain hops are not haze positive. It's just they don't have the polyphenols for it. But certain things like
So you're saying haze positive can apply to things other than yeast?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are certain ingredients that are more likely to cause haze, and I need to look. I could look this up. I don't recall exactly what it is, but it's either rolled or torrefied oats. It's a certain type of oats. I think it was. It's higher in manganese, which is known to catalyze free radical reactions, causing to more rapid haze degradation instead of NEPAs. I can't recall exactly what ingredient it is.
Manganese is the enemy of the IPA. Let's get that one out there. It also oxidizes your nice hop aromas. Get that manganese out of there. It's horrible.
How do you get manganese out of that beer?
It's tough choosing manganese in hops. It's an inside job. It's in the hops. and in the malts, etc. So it's a big challenge to manage.
But it's higher and lower in certain ingredients, and it's sometimes I was chatting with someone about a year ago on this, and they said that last year's batch of, I think we'll say it was Vic Secret, but I could be wrong on that, was really haze positive, and this year's wasn't. It's like sometimes it also changes through the years as lots change, and cultivars from year to year go on, and it's definitely multivariable.
Yeah, that would make sense. I've definitely heard a lot about that with the hop inconsistencies, particularly like you mentioned Vic Secret. I know Galaxy was the greatest like 7 years ago, and then it went to hot garbage for a bit. Now it's back.
Yes, it did.
Mm-hmm.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, Centennial the same way.
Centennial went whack, eh? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, there's a few. This is like 5 or 6 years ago. It had a bad stretch for a couple of years.
Interesting.
On the note of Bell's Too Hardened, like that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's rough for a beer like that.
Yeah, it had a couple of years where people, it was noteworthy. It was not what it used to be. It's back now.
I use a lot of Michigan Centennial now, which is pretty dope. Like
exactly.
Bell's has really helped prop up that Michigan hop industry.
Good for them.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Interesting. Yeah, the haze side of thing is always always fascinating to us. You know, because it was something that if you're, you know, even when you're talking about when you're having heady in 2016, 17, like 16 is when I remember getting really obsessed with it. I had heady, I think, for the first time, not even knowing what it was in like 2012. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then I had it again, I think in 2015. So I had it pre, you know, orange juice beers. So I loved it for what it was, and for me that was amazing. And then as soon as you discover this, like fuck everything else. It's all, you know.
So,
Yeah.
just to kind of go a bit further on the heady thing, but this is
Yeah.
it's noteworthy for Escarpment because it was actually probably about 2017 because it was
Number 2, second strain we ever isolated, and that was way before
exactly.
2017. I did that in 2013.
We've isolated that several times, and I did it before. I did it at the same time too.
Yeah. Number 1, obviously the goat Orval, but number 2 was Heady Pepper.
Yeah. But I remember trying to do it and being like, this is good. Like, but I was expecting to be, you know, an out of life experience, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
But I remember isolating the yeast for it. This is before Escarpment started. I'm like, this is unique. This is different. Like I remember smelling the petri dish for it. It's like, okay, this is like it's apricots with a bit of mango and a bit of like all these different flavors that I had not expected to be smelling off of a yeast strain. And I remember going to one of the winemakers I worked with at the college, and I was giving the like, smell this. He's like, "What are you? You know, what are you throwing at my face?"
So you guys would take the dregs or whatever at the bottom of the can and then put that shit in a dish and.
Yeah, as long as it's alive, you can culture yeast from a beer. Like most beers are not pasteurized or sterile filtered, unless it's like macro beer. So you can get the yeast out of there and do whatever you want with it.
So you guys did play around with heady.
Cool.
Of course.
Oh, absolutely. That's where Vermont ale yeast comes from.
Okay, so is that how? Like, is yeast proprietary like some of the hops are?
Not the same way. So, yeah, I'll let Richard answer.
Yeah, I mean, some are. So there are the hops. They're protected 2 ways. They're protected through patents and also through limiting where, you know, who has access to the rootstock or the germplasm. Yeast is harder because it's germplasm. That's a good word, right? Yeast is harder because awesome. It's easier to reproduce yeast, right? Like you just need a few cells, right? That's always the quote from our old professor George. Is all it takes is one cell. So there are some that are patented or protected. You know, there are yeast companies that develop yeast and they have an interest in protecting their intellectual property. Okay. So certainly we steer clear of those, and you know we have strains that we've developed that you know we're in the process of protecting, but. By and large, most yeast strains are not protected that way. So you can, isolate it and prop it up, and it's kind of available to everyone. Like the analogy that I use is like no one owns the Roma tomato, but my Roma tomato might be better than yours because I know how to feed it. I know how to grow it better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so technically, if Nate and I wanted to start a brewery, I could get a bottle of Pliny and I could keep that little shit at the bottom. I could be like, bam, bam, make that yeast and be like, all right, got my Westy yeast, and it's completely above board.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And would people do that, or is that kind of whack? Is like, dude, what are you doing? Like, just get the fresh stuff from like a escarpment or something like that. Like, what?
It all has to do with risk. It all has to do with risk. So if if you're home brewing, you're making 20 liters at home of something and it doesn't go wrong, and something goes wrong, it sucks. But you're lost. You're at ingredients by 20. Now, if you have 10,000 liters of something in a tank, and something's going wrong because you cheaped out and you didn't want to, you wanted to push that yeast one more generation in order to try and get stretch it out a bit further, and it craps the bed. That's a much more expensive problem for you to deal with.
Interesting. So it's more of a consistency thing, is why people would purchase a yeast from a stable situation. So there's is stability the key word then, from like if you did your own thing versus going to a professional guys like yourselves?
It's a bit of that.
Okay.
And there are some breweries, like if you go to Molson Labatt's, some of the larger guys, they have little in-house teams of people who, like us, know how to propagate yeast up to whatever volume they need.
Okay.
Now some of those larger breweries work with us because they've realized it's, we're better at it, or it's more cost effective for us to be doing it for them. But there isn't necessarily. Sorry, most breweries will be pitching fresh pitches when on some sort of meter. If you have a brewery that's absolutely spick and span, doing cell counts every single time, is really in tune with how their yeast is performing and handling and how it's feeling in the brewery, they can probably push that yeast further than if someone's not really in tune with how their yeast is doing. They're not providing proper nutrition. They're stressing it out. They're going to be buying yeast more often.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the answer that I'll give is you can grow your own hops, you can grow your own barley, but it might not be as good as the stuff that you buy from Country Malt or Yakima Chief, right? They're specialized.
Exactly.
They focus on that. You can grow your own
That
yeast
makes
too,
sense.
and like some are quite successful at it, but I do think that a lot of brewers end up investing in the consistency that they're able to get from a yeast supplier.
Okay. So the pros would be really like, I know that if you go to you guys, like, like for example, with Fairweather or with Royal City here, you'd be like, all right, boys, doing double IPA. I'm doing this Kiwi common. What do you got that could suit? This is a flavor profile I'm looking for. Then you guys, because you have such a bank of yeast that you essentially would. I'm just trying to get my head around how it works, but like sort of like you could create this one yeast, like, this is fire. Then you can recreate that and then continue to sell that in the liquid form, which is what you guys do primarily, liquid yeast. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. And like the way that I see it is, we kind of serve as like the matchmaker, right? The brewer has an idea of what they want, and we know the yeast, and we can kind of, put two and two together and say, okay, actually, I think this is the right yeast for what you're trying to achieve. So try that out. That's a big part of the value that we're offering versus, just pick whatever's out there, pick your default option. Is I think we can give really good advice to help get closer to that target.
Gotcha.
The other part for this is that we're not dealing with just, brewery A's experiences with the yeast strain. We're getting feedback from every single brewery, in Canada and elsewhere that is using that strain and learning how that strain operates in tons of different environments. So there's certain strains that we'll know quirks of that someone else has had this problem with, or someone knows how to fix it. If someone's really dead set of using a certain organism, we can hive mind the thing and figure out how to actually execute it.
Okay, so if a bunch of breweries end up having the same request, you're like, all right, we need to make something that hits these marks. Or if it's like, hey, we've got this product out on the market, a bunch of breweries are having some issues with it, and it's all the same issue, then cool, we can fix it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to get my head around it because I didn't take chemistry in school. Like, I don't know, like none. I have no real like foundation of any of this stuff. So maybe I'm representing the chemistry lacking folks.
I always decide. I always I'll have students come in my classroom for who are scared of science, and they hear any sort of like yeast and fermentation, they get freaked right out. I'd say as a company, we have a pretty large disdain for people who try to block information on this stuff, because it's not helpful. Like you can think of yeast cells like your pet, and you actually see a lot of breweries talk about yeast cells like their pet. Like, my yeast cell likes these conditions. My yeast cells don't like being cold crash radically. They prefer step crashing. My yeast cells, prefer when I use 2-row barley versus Pilsner malt. They're happier. They ferment faster. Like you can have almost like a hedonic or more like an emotional relationship with the living organism. You don't have to be fluent in sciences. It's not it shouldn't be a barrier.
That makes sense. Okay, no, I like that, because I think even if Nate and I, if we think about all the people we've talked to over 10 years on this pod, like a reasonable portion of folks came from a homebrew background and started a brewery. I would say probably the majority. Would that be fair?
Yeah,
The majority, yeah. And then there's some who went to school, and there's some who, and some dudes like say Derek from Brewski in Montreal are more on that biochemistry type of thing, and then kind of like a super like intense with it. So that we've sort of seen across the board there's different understandings of it, and people are still able to make incredible beer regardless of their level of understanding of the depth of the science of it. It's and I have zero
for sure.
Yeah, it's a total different skill set, and some people move towards it and really want to understand it and can tweak it in a different level, and some people are just like, I don't know, this shit just works this way, we just do it, and they and then that works just as well. And that's always the fascinating thing about beer. It's just I don't have that basic knowledge myself, so I get to sit down with people like you guys too often, so this is like super fun to kind of get some of these nuances out. And
This is like, I think, the 4th or 5th week I was working at Grand River, and I remember we were doing a collaboration with another brewery. I won't say which one, because the beer didn't turn out. And that's part of the story for this. These guys had gone over the hop bill. They'd gone over the melt bill. Like, they were thinking about everything. Like we're in Cambridge, so the water profile's aggressively hard. So they're doing water modifications. They're bringing in distilled water. It's all something like 100 liters of beer. Like, this is not, it's so much effort and thought labor just for a small volume.
Right.
And I remember we get to the very end of it. It's like, okay, what yeast are you using? I was going to throw yeast at it. How much? I don't know. I hope it works. I remember just being being floored by this, being like, someone needs to make this information more accessible and more easy to understand, so that's not the approach. We have people who are going to spend all these hours fretting the hops, fretting the malt, even look at the water profile. I'm just like, I hope it works, because I don't know enough about it. And that's always one of these big, frustration points for me. And I think that's where our content or other stuff that we've done is really help people.
Well, we don't make the beer; the yeast makes the beer, right? Like, that's the reality, right? We make wort,
right?
We're yeast janitors or like farmers. That's what a brewer is.
Yeast farmers. Oh, that's a good one. Yeast farmers. This is really good. You guys are giving us got a lot. Oh
yeah.
There's so many different potential names. You guys have been just knocking out.
Like, we're going to be spoiled for choice here.
It's going to be very, very difficult to choose. I love that.
The yeast farmers bracket janitors.
Yeast farmers out there. Yep.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I got a question for Nate, because you mentioned sensory classes at one point. I would love to hear more about that. Break it down. What are you teaching in these sensory classes?
So there's two different types of sensory classes I teach. One is a standard like BJCP style sensory class where we're walking through all the different courses. That's actually one of the courses I'll be teaching next semester for the college. And that would, if you've ever taken a BJCP study course, it's very similar to that. We're going through, here's what's allowed, here's what's not allowed, here's what to expect, here's what you shouldn't expect, here's what's considered a fault. And then, we go further in, what causes those issues? What are the common protocols or process changes or edits you have to make for a recipe or a process in order to make the thing? I often liken it to, if you look at, like, you can go online and you can find you can print out the recipe for Gordon Ramsay's beef Wellington, and this is a recipe that is sold in many different restaurants that Gordon Ramsay owns, and you can find it on multiple different continents. I think in Toronto, I think there's a recipe that a restaurant he owns. Don't quote me on that. Somewhere in Canada, I believe he still owns a restaurant. But you can get that. Like, the people who are there have been trained on it. They know how to work it. And you can go online and find the recipe, the ingredients that are used to make it. And people will feel better about that, because it's, ingredients go into it, but you're missing like 95% of what's important for it. You're missing how am I making the cuts? How am I cooking the thing? What type, like, how fine am I mincing something? Like, you're mixing all these process details that make the dish what it is. So we then have to go in through that course and talk about how do you actually execute each one of these beer styles, not just here's what ingredients are used. It's how do you actually use the ingredients to execute and attain a certain flavor profile or mouthfeel or texture or, aroma on a certain product. The other sensory class I teach is personally is my favorite course I teach. And it's all about understanding how this thing that is in our skull translates what we taste into signals, and how it works, and what people actually enjoy, what people don't enjoy. And you know, what makes people go, I want more of that thing? You know, style be damned. I don't care what beer style it is. Do you like it? It's something I'm constantly seeing in that class. So like for that rope beer example, that's my sensory class. So my BJCP study class where I have all these students all tasting this beer at the same time. But other times I'm talking about a beer and I have a student going, it's a great example of a Russian Imperial Stout. It's like, I don't care. Do you like it? Yeah, well, I do like it because it's a great example of Russian Imperial Stout. No. Do you like the beer? Do you like Russian Imperial Stout? No.
There we go.
There we go. Why did it take you so long to get there? And because it's really trying to get the brewer out of their own mindset, out of their own head. Because like no one's buying pints at a bar thinking, oh, this is a great example of Polish style Gratzer. No, it's like, do you like the beer?
Right.
Do they like the thing you're drinking?
Right.
And that's the thing I think I find some people have lost. I think as an industry, we found that again, by the way. I see the last couple of years, this is one of the few silver linings I think that might have been post-COVID. People are really focusing on, like, do I enjoy this thing? Am I willing to spend my hard-earned money on this? I think we're starting to find that again. But there was a time period where we had lost it.
I would agree with that. I think that has come back around, and people are like have more gravitated towards, do I like this, as opposed to, is this technically correct?
Yeah, and also, like, do I like this because it's trendy and hype, or do I actually like this?
Right.
Yeah.
That's probably the better point to make there. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot less like hype, except for pickle beers. Pickle beers are really hype for some reason.
I don't understand that.
Burdock and Hendo.
And Henderson.
Pretty happy to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate pickles with my whole life.
And what's the other one? Grove is the other one that's big on pickles. Yeah.
Grove?
Yeah.
I don't know them.
That's another Ontario one, and there are other ones that are like very into making a pickle beer at like once or twice a year or some shit.
Gotcha. Hey man, if you're into it, good for you.
When we were at Great Lakes, we did a collaboration with a pickle, like a small pickle manufacturer. They don't exist anymore, but like we took one of their barrels and we fermented the beer in it, and we put pickles in it, and maybe it ruined me on the style. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, look, I feel like pickles. I feel like I hate pickles so much. I have about 10 different people who would probably once a week, one of them would tag me in something to do with pickles, but they'd go on Facebook and they'd do the thing where it's like add to your profile. I always do it. I always play along, like a pickle pizza or like a pickle hot dog where the pickle's the bun and all this bullshit. People are obsessed. So I don't know. I didn't grow up with them, so I don't really understand it. I like cucumbers as they are. I don't need them to be fucked up by water and all this other stuff. Leave them alone. But it's like, yeah, I think the funniest part of all of this is calling pickle beers hype. I don't know if I would have described it as that, but maybe because I'm out of that world, I don't really think of it. But maybe it is. Maybe people are fucking with the pickles.
I think it's more. I think it's more a cult following kind of thing. I don't know if it's so much hype, but it's like a very, very enthusiastic niche.
People get
it
mad.
Seems to be selling. I know Burdock's got a pickle product in the LCBO, so I don't actually think it's a seltzer. But
that hit LCBO.
They're going. Yeah,
so funny.
Now there is that gray area where, like, there's the drink the pickleback, which I think can be quite good. Depending on
the shot.
I think you take a pickle juice or something like that, and then you
put some shit in it.
Like a shot and then pickle juice. Just
yeah. If they made a seltzer pickleback, I could see that working.
Dead ass, bro. This brand, I'm talking like either during COVID or just before COVID. This brand from the States sent me pickle seltzers, and I tried one because I needed to do the content, and I gave it to somebody who I knew who liked pickles, but Jesus Lord in heaven, that was disgusting. And it was like non-alcoholic seltzers, by the way, like just fizzy water. Soda, like not even, because I don't know if it was sweet. It was like a fizzy water, which I'm a big fan of. This is fizzy water with pickle flavor, and I'm like, and it was like Pickle Rick from fucking Rick and Morty branded. And I appreciated that. I thought that was pretty funny. That's why I was like, when they hit me up, do you want it? And I'm like, you know what? Even if I don't like it, this is kind of fun. I'll take a picture of it and post on Instagram.
Sell it until you get the cease and desist.
Basically, I wonder if it was licensed now you mention it. But yes, pickle beers. Why are we talking about pickle beers? I lost the track.
We're talking about how hype is dying. Yeah, that was the original
which
point.
I think is a good thing. I think people are really gravitating to what they want, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. With that, how do you guys feel about the next one?
I feel
it's probably about time.
Oh, did you say bathroom? Let's do bathroom break.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We'll be back in a sec. You guys won't even notice. And we are back.
And we are back.
And we are ready for a nice little non-alcoholic little break between these beers right here. So we are going to get into this gem right here, Market Zero, from the Lords at Royal City, non-alc. I think it's a pale ale. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's pale ale.
Pale ale? Only 60 calories, boys. That's what I'm talking about. 1 gram of protein.
Yeah.
Let's fucking go. All you need, if I'm trying to get 180 of these a day, I'm set.
It's the only non-alc beer that's also a Big Lebowski reference. So you gotta shout out to Royal City for that one. Really?
What's the? No, I've never seen. I know. It's one of those ones. You know, how you just miss stuff.
Well, I mean, the reference is just gonna whiz right by you. Then.
Oh, okay, so never mind. I thought there might be a simple
You gotta
explanation.
watch that. You gotta watch that scene. Just Google Market Zero. You'll see.
It'll come up. Okay. I was wondering
Oh,
why
yeah.
there was like the bowling pins on there. I figured it would be some sort of reason there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Royal City, I learned this like last week or the week before that Royal City are pretty they know what they're doing with their non-alcs.
Yes.
Which is very cool to see. Talk to us about this one, fellas. What's the deal?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a beer we kind of worked together on, so I wanted to make sure I include it. And the other ulterior motive here is to talk about how the industry is changing and how categories are changing as well. Non-alc has been the biggest growing category of beer in the last couple of years, right? It's a big thing. It's becoming a bigger thing. Royal City, I think, has been pretty ahead of the curve in that. They invested in the pasteurizer, so now they're able to make non-alcoholic beer safely. They just launched a line of sodas. They're helping other producers make non-alcoholic beers, sodas, kombucha, all sorts of things as like a co-manufacturer as well. So kind of adding to their business that way, just, which I think is really smart. It's hard to make money in the craft beer business. So being able to diversify through, equipment investments is a really smart move in my view. And so one example of coming out of that is this beer, which is a non-alcoholic pale ale that Royal City offers year round. It's called Market Zero. So it is in fact a Big Lebowski reference. And it's a nice, tasty pale ale. It's got some hop content. It's got a yeast that wasn't developed by us. They're using right now the Lona strain from Lallemand, but we do partner quite heavily now with Lallemand. We are a distributor for their dry yeast products. So still, and we've developed yeast for them that they've made available around the world. So it's kind of a cool partnership. And that's a good example. They've got this great strain for non-alcoholic beer. It doesn't ferment maltose, so it doesn't touch most of the sugars that are found in beer wort. So it makes it really easy to make a clean non-alcoholic beer without some of the really, really expensive equipment investments. So in Royal City's case, they use this yeast to produce a limited fermentation, and then they can take that finished beer, run it through their pasteurizer. Beer is safe. It's made properly, which I can't say for all non-alcoholic beer out there. They even work with us to test their beer in our lab and make sure that it's safe. And they've been able to make that available to their customers, and it's been pretty successful so far.
Hell yeah.
That's
Well, with
great.
that, gentlemen, cheers. Get that in you.
Cheers.
Great nose.
And I figured it's good for us to go NA after that 8% double IPA.
You know what? I
That's
kind
a
of
good call.
I would have thought that it tastes like water after that, but it's fantastic. There's like a nice little like interlude It's
Yeah.
definitely more of an American style pale ale as far as got a little bit of bitterness in there. The head is bonkers. The head is
and like a lot
meringue.
of hop forward non-alcoholic beers, it's it's quite citric. It's got a very bitter citric punch to it, which
Yep.
is which is not unpleasant on in a very light body, especially following a big double
Big
IPA.
Merc
It's
boy.
actually quite nice.
Yeah.
Interestingly, we also had a non-alc when we had Colin from Labo on. So it seems like it's a good canvas for talking about yeast.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's been one of the big advantages of us, merging with the Labo team as well, is they've really carved out a strength in non-alcoholic beer. I think Quebec is way ahead of the curve in North America for NA. Like, you go to a bottle shop in Montreal and like half the beers are NA. Like, they're way ahead of the curve compared to everyone else. I think that's where things are going. And craft breweries have really doubled down on NA in Quebec, and I think they're reaping some of those benefits. And I think that the rest of us are going to be following.
I couldn't agree more. I remember I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but we did a pod in 2018 with Beeralug, which is a beer store in Hochelaga, and we had 4 beers, all of them sub 5%, and one of them I think was non-alcoholic, and one was 2%, and that I'm like, who the this is 2018. I'm like, who wants this shit, bro? And then you look at it everywhere else, and now I hated non-alcoholic for the longest time, and then it took Libra, who out of Prince Edward Island, big fan. They sent us some stuff, I think in end of 2020, and we were like, oh, I get it now. And then basically been a fan of non-alcs ever since, and I'm very excited to hear. I was talking to Dan the other week at Wellington, and he was telling me they got the pasteurized and they're doing non-alc brands for themselves and for others that he couldn't disclose, but I thought that was really cool that they've moved into that world, like you said, Richard, diversifying, but also it's just such a cool market. Ontario is definitely behind Quebec, but I feel like a significant portion of breweries have something now of even if it's not a sparkling water, which is great. Personally, huge fan of those, but a really solid, just one non-alcohol offering, someone like Bellwoods who's really gone balls to the wall with it have a whole bunch. But Rorschach have one, and a few. I'm sure you guys can probably name a few more, but I feel like there's a bunch of breweries who are really doing it. And I think it's it's sick. It's a cool thing, and it's a great little offering. It's almost you go in there, you get your beer. You might just give me a 4-pack of those. I'll chuck that in for the for either the little these interludes or the nights when you're not drinking, you just want a little something. It's great.
Yeah. Libra and Jelly King non-alc are the two that kind of to me were okay, this is there's something to be had here. This is not wort in a can. This is not.
There's something
it's so differentiated.
There's something extra that really works with the with the Jelly Kings, and I feel like non-alc sours in particular just really pop. I'm not a huge fan generally of hop forward non-alcs, just because as they were saying, they can be really citrus forward and kind of with a kind of harsh bitterness to them that I and with really sharp carbonation that I don't always love. But non-alc sours taste like the real thing. You'd almost never know it was non-alc. And the Jelly Kings in particular are just they just pop so much.
We did a side by side of the non-alc and the regular Jelly King, and the non-alc was better. In our
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so interesting. And Blood Brothers did their paradise. They've got 2 or 3 Paradise Lost apparently that are non-alc. We're having those at the events as well for the DDs who are driving the stuff. But super cool.
Yeah, non-alc is a whole new world, and I don't think people understandably so, how to approach it. So I need to kind of do the disclaimer, the boilerplate type thing.
Please do it.
If you don't do this right, you can hurt people.
Oh yeah. With non-alc?
Absolutely. So with non-alcoholic, one of the biggest things that allows alcoholic beer to be food safe is the alcohol. Any sort of Listeria, botulinum, botulism, Clostridium botulinum, E. coli, Salmonella, those things all die mainly because of the alcohol. So when we remove the alcohol from these products, we're removing one of our main barriers for defense. So one of the reasons that we really like Royal City is that Royal City is doing it right. They have the pasteurizer. They're doing the testing on the pasteurizer when they run it to make sure that nothing is in it. You know, so you can find it online, but someone did a little test where they went around to a bunch of different bars and then took samples of non-alc and plated, like they were on draft, and plated them, and they were littered with a bunch of stuff. There's a test that was done in the UK. It can be a little dicey. Like you need to make sure that you're doing it right. Now, this is not the Fairweather podcast where we just kind of wax poetic about those guys. But one of the beers that those guys do, I think, really well is Chuggies, which is that like 2 to 3% ABV beer. Like I know some people have done the civilian science of like, can I, if I'm drinking this all day through my 8-hour shift, will I blow over a breathalyzer? And it's close to zero. Like if you're looking for a way, if you don't have a pasteurizer, if you don't have the infrastructure to do this right, in my personal opinion, I'm not even saying this is like me as Escarpment, it's just me as me. I think you should try making a low ABV beer before you start making a non-alcoholic beer.
Gotcha.
Like one of the beers that we used to have when I was at Grand River days, is way back when, was a 3% mild ale, and it was great because I had to have 1 or 2 of them with lunch, and I had zero buzz. It was great, and I love having that kind of low ABV beer you can just kind of have as a session or with a meal or something like that, and not have to worry. There are some risks with strict non-alc that I would feel personally bad and maybe responsible if I didn't mention.
Interesting.
I'm a big proponent of what I call like ultralight beers, right, in that 2 to 3% range, because I think that they have a lot of benefits, especially because it's just easier to make it taste good than a full non-alc. And I've had many people in the industry tell me, oh, that'll never be a thing. Why would anyone want to drink that? People buy out, want to pay for alcohol, but then you see Fairweather and other breweries start to actually launch these products and they're successful. So I'm here for it personally. I think there's a big place for that. What has been told to me is the uncanny valley. I think there's room in there too, because straight NA is going to be limiting for most breweries to be able to actually produce.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I guess that's why places like Royal City offer their services, because they have name just pasteurizer. I've been to Collective. They have one that's like fucking 50 meters long. It's insane. So it's like, there's a few different options depending on your volumes of places that can do this at a high level. And because I feel like when I tried stuff back in the day, I was just like, it tastes like it's a bit of an acquired taste, and some do it well, some do it not so well. Like, Nate, you talk about the hoppy ones. I think they're harder to do. This to me smells like opening a bag of Cascade or Centennial or something. Like
Totally.
Like this smells like hops and stuff. Whereas like the sours are probably a bit easier, but a lot of them masked with fruit, which is even if they're not perfect, they just taste like a normal Jelly King for the most part. So it's quite interesting, but it's cool to see. So from the yeast side, because I want to get into the Labo thing, because I know that was kind of the point, but a quick overview of the yeast. I know there's multiple ways to make non-alcoholic. There's like arrested fermentation. There's a specific yeast, and there's like a third way that I always forget. So I don't know if you guys could like touch on those and what this one is specifically.
Yeah, there's 4 ways you can do it. So
there's 4.
There's 2 through fermentation, and there's 2 through technology.
Okay.
With technology, you can remove the alcohol through distillation, which is usually done under vacuum, so lower boiling temperature, basically. Or you can do it through a membrane, so a really, really fine filter that actually you can remove the alcohol using a super high pressure in a filter. Those are great. Those do work well. They're really expensive. You need a very expensive machine that you have to buy. So what a lot of breweries will also look at as fermentation approaches. You have 2 options. One is called arrested fermentation, meaning you use a regular yeast and you stop it prematurely. So that can work well. It's a challenge because you got to stop it at the right point. So you got to really watch the timing. The other option is what's called maltose negative yeast, which is yeast that doesn't ferment maltose, which is the main sugar found in wort. So using a maltose negative yeast makes that fermentation process easier because you don't have to watch it every hour. It hits a certain limit and then it's done. So that has become more popular, I would say, is using the maltose negative yeast. It's a lot more compatible with smaller brewery processes where you don't have staff, checking the tanks in the middle of the night. And there's strains that are available now on the market that offer, some really nice flavor opportunities with maltose negative. So I talked about the Lallemand Lona. It's a great strain for neutral beers. I do think that the Hanseníase, it's called Uverum, Hanseníaspora Uverum strain from Labo, who's our new partner in Quebec, is a really great strain for getting a little bit more flavor into the non-alcs as well, because this is a strain that's more positive in biotransformation and fruity flavors, which can also help mask that like wordiness in a non-alc beer and make it taste more convincing.
Wordiness, honestly, that is such a good word for this, because that's sometimes like it does taste like unfermented water, like you're just tasting homebrew in that earlier stage.
Well, sometimes it is. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
technically. Oh, interesting.
There you go.
Okay. So this one, I guess, is the yeast, obviously, because it's got the loner. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful.
Correct. Yeah.
I like this a lot. I'm almost finished. This is glorious. This is such a fun beer. And I know Royal City are really great at all this type of stuff. So that is this is phenomenal. Then on the note of you guys and the Labo merging, do you want to speak to that? I mean, obviously that's a Quebec-based yeast company. You guys are here in Ontario. How did it happen? What's the deal? Obviously, there's been a lot of mergers. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's like, there's been a bunch of mergers. I never see them and be like, that's dumb. I'm always like, fuck, man, whatever it takes to survive, make the business survive. And I saw this happening with you guys. I was like, that's an interesting situation, because there's always two breweries that we've seen. So yeah, I'd love to hear how that'll happen.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the era we're in, right? Businesses finding ways to team up with each other and make things work better, and that's really the origin of that story too. So Labo in Quebec started up at the same time we did as a yeast producer, and they've done a really great job of capturing that market. We were really never able to. As Escarpment Labs, we were never really able to be kind of the dominant option in Quebec. They had the home team advantage, right? They certainly do a better job of speaking the language, and they're there in Quebec making yeast. So we always kind of worked as competitors for a long time. We knew each other. We had
friendly competitors.
Friendly
competitors.
Like
exactly.
all over the beer,
yeah. But. It's towards the end of last year, the conversation became, well, does it really make sense to be competing here? Are there opportunities we could actually work together and add value to each other? So those conversations kept moving and moved in a positive direction, and we made the decision to merge our businesses and find, certainly part of that is economical, just trying to future proof ourselves and be as efficient as possible, because at the end of the day, craft beer is not easy. Yeast supply is not easy. These are tough businesses now. So we saw some opportunity to be more efficient, but it's also an opportunity to be stronger, right? And play into Escarpment's strength in being the go-to yeast supplier for most of Canada, as well as Labo's strength of being definitely the go-to supplier for Quebec, and providing the best support for that really important beer market. And so together we're able to provide a really strong support across all of Canada. And really my goal is make our combined company by far the go-to option for anyone in Canada who needs yeast and needs good advice to use that yeast.
Because not only
there's
doubling...
also one other.
Go no, sorry, Nate, go on.
So there's the other part to this, that there are certain things that Labo is absolutely better at as far as the thing that brought us this is know-how. We can take some of that knowledge was literally kind of language locked with them. So now with the two of us together, we can now bring these to Alberta, to BC, to other parts of Ontario. is now a greater
yeah,
breadth of products and knowledge we can share.
I said it before, like non-alc is so far ahead in Quebec. I think Quebec non-alc is ahead of the U.S. And talk about a big
I
market
would
that's
agree.
interested in that
Yeah.
area. It's kind of crazy to me. I'm like, there's better in non-alc in Quebec than there is in the U.S. These guys still think that athletic is the end all be all, and like, it's not. I'm sorry. It's fine, but there's
Yeah.
lots of other ways to make that beer.
You go to a store in the States, and I always found that like there was like to a specific bottle shop, there might be a little end cap, and they'd have Sierra Nevada Deschutes, Notch just started one. You'd have Athletic, a couple others, and that was kind of it. And then you mentioned before you go to a DEP in Quebec. I haven't been in a couple of years, but I'm going in like 2 weeks, and I'm looking forward to going to a store and seeing multiple fridges full of this shit. I remember Laboc Ale. They started it. Laboc Ale started everything in like 10 years ago. Like, and they were so fire, and because obviously it is borderless, right? As soon as it's non-alky, it doesn't matter, everything's out the window, so you can go nuts. So you're selling soda, so it's you can go and push it. So it's very cool to hear that. And I was going to say that that Nate, you kind of already beat me to it. Just the melding of the knowledge that you have on both sides now. Now you've got this like this super well-rounded bilingual company that basically can take care of all the needs of breweries, and anyone else has yeast requirements essentially in Canada now, between you all, from non-alc to the biggest stout that you need, or mixed firm, or any of that type of stuff from what it sounds like. Which is
that's dope.
What was the response like? Were people like shocked, happy? Like, I never asked anyone who had a merger yet. Like, what's the vibes? Like, was it like you put it, because you guys have got internal and you guys are excited about it because it's you two and Angus, your partner, and you got the Labo folks. And I imagine you guys are all like positive. You got your plans for the future and your strategy, and you're like, fuck yeah, it's going to be great. And then you put it out to the world, and people are either, what's the general reception been for you all?
I have not talked to a single person who thought negatively of it.
Yeah, I mean, the response was pretty positive. Like, I think we did have some anxiety about it, right? I mean, there is this, potential sentiment of, the big, and the big Ontario company is, taking over the little Quebec guy, and they're going to change everything. But we were, pretty careful in thinking through that, and, trying to make sure that we're keeping boots on the ground in Quebec, because that's a huge part of the value, and making sure that we're continuing to offer that to the customers. And so that was always the strategy from the start, was to, work together on the communications around this, right? And try to make sure that what we end up with at the end of the whole process is something that actually works better for the customers in Quebec and in the rest of Canada. So, I mean, I will say most of the breweries outside of Quebec were just like, oh, that's cool. But then in Quebec, obviously, there's more conversations, right? They want to know, where's the yeast coming from, who's representing it, how are they getting support. But overall, once that was explained to them, the reception was really, really positive. I think that people were really excited that we kind of took this step to work together and maintain our abilities and enhance our abilities to support the breweries, right? Because I think the worst thing for the brewers in Quebec would be to have that totally disappear.
Of course, and it's one of the biggest beer markets in the country, and it's one of the best. Ontario and Quebec, I don't know. I'm very torn, but I feel like they're both the two most exceptional, forward-thinking beer scenes, and they are quite different, and they have different needs.
Yeah, like over the last decade, they've definitely like leapfrogged each other a little bit, but that's a good thing. Like and like they've in 2025, I feel like they've gotten pretty neck and neck in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
big time. Different, little different approaches, but at the end of the day, like they're sort of between the two. They're like easily. I don't think anyone would argue that the two provinces are the leaders of craft beer in Canada. I mean, BC probably be the third, but they just dominated. So it's Go on, man.
No, I say I've had some very good beers from Alberta, but I also have a hard time keeping track of the beers from Alberta, which ones would be from BC, and that's a fault of my own. I don't get out enough. I got 2 kids here. I don't leave.
I've,
Come to here.
I've also had some very good beers in Alberta. My best friend lives out there. I've also had some very good beers in Nova Scotia as well. Like it's like obviously like as soon as you think about it more, like, oh, you know what, like there's good beers here, there's good there's good beers there too. But like yeah. You'd still be hard pressed to make that that anyone is like really overall doing it better than Ontario and Quebec.
Yeah, it's like Toronto and Montreal are definitely like hubs.
I mean, the thing I love about Canada is there's pockets of brilliance everywhere, right? You can look at like Blind Enthusiasm making better lambic than they do in Belgium out in Edmonton. Like that's fucking awesome. You can look at wild. Like, you know, Kitty Vitty brewing in the most beautiful setting in the country as a brewery, right? Like out in Newfoundland. You can look at like
or like Oval in like Gaspésie, making some of the best like mixed firm stuff anywhere in North America.
Yeah, so I guess my point is we have great beer everywhere, but I mean certainly by volume, Ontario and Quebec are dominant. You know, so much beer is made in those two places.
For sure. So it makes a lot of sense that there's that you guys would team up from those two provinces and have that shit on lock, which means you've got arguably the most knowledge and the most experience and all the different styles covered. Like you mentioned, you guys didn't really have the non-alc stuff on lock, but Labo does. So you're like, boom, now, okay. So then they can tap your knowledge base, you tap theirs, and all the customers are all of yours. And it's just like, just continue to deliver the best possible service. And that, I feel like that's like a nice little, what's the word? A nice little, oh my God, what's the thing when you move on to the next subject, obviously? Oh my God.
Transition?
No, that's segue. Segue. Jesus Lord, it's the non-alcoholic, bro. It fucking got me.
Oh man, just fucking wreck you.
I know, right? For 2 hours in, 3 beers, one's a non-alc. I'm just off my tits. But the
fucking lightweight, man. Jesus Christ.
I've been really tired lately, Nate. I feel like I'm just getting hit. But yeah, like a nice segue into like we're talking about the Canadian side of stuff. Obviously, it's one of the big topics in the beer world and in the world in general right now, particularly with tariffs and potential changes to the way that things operate over here. And we talked to breweries about it. Breweries have given us their perspectives. Obviously, there's things like the aluminium and the can production. We got the hop issue. I saw that YCH put out a blast recently that they moved basically, I think at least for the rest of the year and maybe into next year, all the stock that is contracted, because even if it's contracted, it's still going over a border, which means 25%. So they've moved it to their warehouses in Canada, from what I understand, which is pretty dope. What's the yeast vibes? Because I feel like no one's really talking about that.
Most of our inputs that we use are domestic. The only one, and it's a big one, is our malt. So just based on how we ourselves and most of our yeast manufacturers operate, is we use malt extract. Having grain, having to crush grain and things like that. There's lactobacillus on the grain. It's a dust hazard. It's not worth it. Operationally wise, it has not seemed to make sense. The tariffs might change that, but as historically, it didn't make sense.
Gotcha.
That we have to buy from the U.S. There is no domestic manufacturer of brewing grade malt extract in Canada. There used to be, but it no longer exists. So that's the only real part. That's the main input that we have. We have some other additives that are from the U.S. that we do hit tariffs with. Or I guess if the tariffs do go into effect again.
Like what I will say is, like, in terms of yeast itself, right now there's no tariffs because at least in terms of going over to the U.S., they've decided that for now anything that's covered under the previous free trade agreement, the USMCA, is kind of standing for now. So like they've been pretty specific in their stupid tariffs. They're tariffing the hell out of cars and steel and stuff like that. So right now, like, yeast going into the U.S. is not being tariffed. There's like a couple days where yeast going to the U.S. was tariffed. Canada has not levied tariffs on yeast whatsoever so far in our strategic package. But we have tariffed malt products. So we're in a shitty scenario where, Canada has decided to tariff these malt extracts coming in from the US, but we're not actually benefiting from any kind of reciprocal tariff in Canada, defending domestic products. So, US yeast is still on equal footing with Canadian yeast. So, really at the end of the day, that's fine. Like I don't feel like we need to have that advantage. I hope that brewers are open to buying Canadian made yeast, which is competitive in price, and I think in excess in terms of the value that Escarpment is able to offer to Canadian breweries when compared to American competitors in the current climate.
Interesting that it's like one of those ones where it wasn't reciprocal. So then it's like, okay, so it puts you guys in a position. What?
Yeah. Just a quick side on this. Our supplier has been great on this. They've brought in several months or a couple months of supply for us, kind of like the hops, before all this stuff really went into effect. So we're like financially, we're in a buffer, which is really nice. Not a year's supply by any means, but thank you, trainers.
A bit of a buffer.
I mean, the whole system's wacky because, like, they've said, okay, we're going to tariff your aluminum and steel, and Canada's like, we're going to tariff your Ovaltine. Like, it's kind of wacky.
Yeah. It doesn't make much sense.
It seems a little kind of, Nate said, hard to keep up with, and a little bit like sporadic, and just being like, that's getting tariff. Like, it's like there's not a consistent, yeah, which is a little bit obscene, and it's all so unnecessary. But I guess that's another conversation.
One thing that I do want to kind of add on this, and this is my confidence. What I'm about to say isn't 100%, so I'm a little bit actually cautious to say it. Edit this out if we need to. So the FDA has caused some issues. Like there has been restrictions on FDA and people who are actually associated with the border. So trying to get things in and around that area has been pressing. That's one of the things that we just from a logistics standpoint. It's how to put this properly. Richard, jump in if you want to jump in. It is easier for people that use domestic products than across the border.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like things are getting wacky. What I will say is like we have imported a few of our ingredients from the US for years. In the last 2 weeks is the first time we've ever had a customs delay bringing our ingredients into Canada. So it stands to reason that might start to hit some of the breweries bringing yeast in as well. So that is a potential risk, and there is no shortage of yeast supply and support domestically here in Canada. So our goal is to make that that switch obvious and easy to the brewers that are still importing yeast from the US.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and there are a handful.
Right. So it would make, I mean, look, obviously in this sort of like in the last few months, I guess there's been a pretty strong spirit of, buy Canadian and try to support local as much as possible. Doesn't get much more local than you guys out there in Guelph and the Labo now in Montreal and now combining forces. So for breweries who are purchasing or have, traditionally purchased their yeasts from elsewhere, particularly the States, but essentially outside of Canada, like what are the benefits of working with Escarpment Labo? What's the kind of how's it going to make their lives easier? Can you match if they're getting something? Can you like match what they've been doing, particularly if they got flagships that they're concerned about, things like that?
Yeah, in terms of equivalency, I mean, we have equivalents for pretty much any yeast out there, and we have a lot of scientific work that we've done to help back that up and make that easy. It's always scary to switch from one supply to another, but we have a lot of information that can help back that up and a lot of support that can help back that up, and I think that's our collective strength. I think we do a really, really good job of support and advice and technical guidance, and you can ask our customers. I think they will back that up as well. We've put a lot of energy into education and support. I mean, Nate and I just like absolutely doubled down on education when COVID hit, and now we have all this stuff that's out there for the brewers to use, and we've kind of just kept that rolling. because we found that people really, really like that and appreciate that. And, it's one thing to get the yeast, but it's another thing to know exactly how to use it and how to get the best results from it. So I think that's a big, advantage we can offer. And, really another opportunity with us is that focus. Like it's harder to export to the US. 90% of our business is in Canada. So we have the opportunity to really focus on Canadian brewers and what they need and provide the best possible support to them. And I don't think that anyone else is going to be able to do that.
Gotcha. And on top of that, I would also imagine that the fact that you are physically present means that if they need to come see you, they can do that. Excuse me. Or vice versa. If you want to go see the client, you're actually physically able to do that, and you got presence. Do you have a presence across Canada, or is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm sure a lot of brewers are used to seeing Nate and I, but then we also have, our co-founder Angus is quite active in the market. So is Shelley, our account manager, and then Max at Labo as well. So across the country, I think everyone should have a familiar face that they can call up. Otherwise, we're not doing our job.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and we're pretty easy to get a hold of. Like you go on our website, you can find pretty much any of our contacts.
Right, which is perfect. But if you're a client, you've probably already got all the details of whoever your point of contact is, and breweries can work with you like very directly. There's no messing around. That like if you want something specific, because it sounds like the great example is this Luminance double IPA with the Pink Boots blend. Like you're like, hey, why don't we do that? Like you created it, so. I imagine though, if a brewery's like, well, one, you did mention that you can match flavor profiles, and you got something that kind of matches anything else. If someone's using like a different brand in the States, then they got that. But then if they're like, hey guys, like it's either you could request like, yeah, I want something that does this, and this in this style of beer. Then you're like, sweet, we have this. Or can you like be like, do a bespoke yeast? Be like, yeah, we could actually create that. Is that a thing?
It is a thing. It's expensive.
Okay,
we do it, but you gotta know what you're getting yourself into. It is expensive to develop a custom yeast.
What's more common is that someone has a proprietary yeast or a yeast strain that brewery's been using for 10 years or 5 years. Like it's their house culture. We can simply take that culture, bank it, and then regrow it for them. So we do have a handful of clients that have house yeast or proprietary yeast to their brew facility. If someone wants us to genetically engineer something or create something for them, that is a separate project. That is a much larger endeavor.
But we do. I'm a collector. I grew up in the Pokemon era. Got to catch them all. So, and I have really taken that lesson to heart. So we have 2,000 strains in our bank. So we do have everything.
Right. So whatever you need, people, you can either pull from that, and then they can like. I don't know the terminology, like manipulate it in any way, or is it sort of like what if you got that bank and they ask for something? That means they can just get something as close to what they need, or essentially 2,000? I mean, how many flavor profiles are there?
I mean, most of the time, in terms of they're looking for a specific strain, we have it. If they're looking for a specific profile, like we look at what we have in terms of our available data. If that doesn't exist, then we can certainly look at making that. And, a lot of our research and development has been tuned towards being able to get to that target faster and easier. We've been doing a lot of work to, characterize our yeasts and really accelerate that research and development process. So that part is getting easier and cheaper too.
Interesting. Okay, that's really cool. I was kind of like pulling it out of my ass because I didn't know if it was totally possible. And I've been told to say with like, if you think of hops, it can take 10 years. The reason why they're trademarked or patented is that they take a decade to cultivate, and you crossbreed it. And you're like, yeah, it's not quite right. You got to keep like tweaking to get it to an HBC number, and then it's like a whole process. So I guess maybe yeast is probably maybe not 10 years, but it's got to be.
It's not as much, but it's more than 6 months, less than 2 years.
Right.
Gotcha.
I mean,
Okay.
it keeps getting faster, though. You know, we keep
That's
making
another part.
bigger and bigger data sets, and then it allows us to move faster. So that's a big part of my job.
Is it as
Yeah, if,
simple? Sorry, Nate, go on.
no, I was gonna say, if you want, like some of the strains we've done for this, also you can find on our website. Like we have ones like Hydra, which is a crossbreed of two common New England IPA yeast that we kind of fuse together to make something new. Our Thial Libre, one of our original, thial positive yeast strains, that was a hybridization between was it a yeast strain found on guava and a Quebec?
Yep, wild yeast. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so some of these will take only a few months, while other ones like our Super Fog and our Super Lager, those were different methods, different techniques to produce it. Let's see, it felt like a faster timeline. Richard, we probably could figure out the actual days required, but it felt faster.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a lab meeting earlier today, and I found out that we made 16 new hybrids that we're going to test in a couple weeks. So yeah, it's moving fast.
Okay, people ain't messing around. Is it as simple
Yeah.
as if someone asks for a flavor profile and you're like, boom, if I go that one and that one, chuck them together, boom, or is that too simple?
I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we can get there.
Oh, okay, cool. So that's maybe like the ultimate goal is that you've got things where
Yeah.
because I guess you combine them and then those flavors might do something else entirely as opposed to just perfectly blending or whatever, like in cooking.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
even organisms,
Two parents have a baby, and sometimes it's LeBron James, and sometimes it's George Costanza. You never know, right?
Wow, is that the episode? Like LeBron versus George or something? Jesus Christ, I love it. Okay, we have one more product to get to, but I feel like I've just activated. We broke the seal, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You guys cool with a quick break, and then we'll jump into the
Yes.
last one? Yep. All right. We shall be back.
Sounds good.
And we are back.
Back again.
So, switching it up. So, we went from a Kiwi common to a double IPA to a non-alc pale ale, and now we're hitting the seltzer world with
Going to Seltzer Town.
Seltzer Town. Oh, that's a good name. Electric Spritz from Great Lakes, which is a seltzer with hibiscus and lime. And I have not had anything from this series. Is this a series or this is just a one-off that they did?
I think it was a one-off.
Okay.
And this can does have some age, but I wanted to throw that in there because I think it's a really good example of a fermented hard seltzer that tastes good. The seltzer world has kind of really gone in the direction of RTDs. So, breweries buying neutral grain spirit and blending it in. But there is this other world of fermenting hard seltzers, which I think has a lot of merit. I think if you do it right, you can actually make something that tastes less boozy and is more, crushable and palatable. But there's a lot of limitations. I think we all remember breweries trying to make hard seltzers when COVID hit.
Yes.
And most of those were really bad. And that's because of limited understanding of yeast nutrition. And so a lot of those seltzers were really sulfury or just had off flavors. But something we kind of worked on the side for several years was dialing in the nutrition for those fermented hard seltzers. So I will admit, we're way late to the game, but we launched a yeast nutrient for seltzers that we call Seltzer Lightning. It kind of follows our nutrient for beer that's called Yeast Lightning. So that is a Grease reference. So Seltzer Lightning is very late to the game, but it works really, really well to make these fermented hard seltzers, it's a great solution for breweries because then they don't have to go and get the distilling license. They can just make this product. And it's a great option just kind of on the same wavelength of diversifying options for consumers. I think a lot of people love to hang out in breweries, but maybe they don't necessarily like beer. So why not offer something to appeal to those consumers? And yet you can buy it, but if you can offer it yourself, then you can usually capture more margin. And, just to be frank, the margin on hard seltzer, if you're a taproom brewery, is awesome. And it's something you should probably be doing.
I'd love to hear that. That's amazing.
And just on one of the parts of the legal elements on this, if you don't have a distillation license, you're not legally supposed to make an RTD, and your margins on making a fermented seltzer are going to be higher than they are if you make an RTD.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, some of the NGS out there is real cheap, but it's also pretty,
Yeah.
not nice tasting.
right. So this one is made with, because I know there's the distilled. So this
Yep.
is not distilled, right? This is
Not
the malt.
distilled. So it's our nutrient. It's our Seltzer Lightning. It's our house ale strain. So that's a dry strain that we offer for clean, neutral beers.
Okay.
It works great in seltzer too. It's gluten free, and then I think they've added some flavorings at the end. And this actually is probably 5 or 6 months old at this point, and I think it's held up pretty well in terms of stability. So just a cool example of
It's like 9 months old.
how a brewery can get up and running with this. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, but it tastes like fine. Like I don't think this is any less bright or effervescent than if it was fresh. I feel like seltzers, man. I feel like they got some time on them.
Yeah, they do.
I had a meeting with a brewer who was just insisting to me that it's impossible for a fermented seltzer to taste good, and they're gonna go whole steam on RTDs. And I handed him this can, and I had him open it and drink it, and just watch this guy change his mind in real time.
Wow.
Actually, I've done that to a few people. So it's cool to see what can be done. And again, like really, this is one of our objectives. Is obviously beer is number one, but if there's ways to help breweries, make more money, then that's also really important to us.
I love that. So okay, so it's like what'd you call it again? A neutral? No, it was the yeast food is what made this.
It's called Seltzer Lightning. Is the nutrient?
Seltzer Lightning is the nutrient that you feed a specific type of yeast, or what type of yeast?
Any yeast. So like the main issue with seltzer is like it's just sugar, so there's no nutrition for the yeast, so you have to add everything. It needs everything added, and so you really have to nail down the nutrition. Otherwise you're going to get off flavors like sulfur, for example, or like it'll be kind of boozy, green apple kind of character. So that's one of the big challenges. Like you're just fermenting sugar, you got to add everything in. So, we've taken what we learned about yeast nutrition over the last several years and baked that into the nutrient blend here. So, any sugar, and any yeast, it'll work and make a nice tasting beverage. So, people are using this in meads and ciders and stuff too, because it's helping them.
Interesting. Okay. And was this the first like commercial product that this yeast had been used in, or there were others?
No, the yeast. It's the yeast that we used in this is house ale. It's an ale strain.
Right. I meant the nutrient.
Yeah, no, the nutrient is new.
The nutrient. This was the first example.
Kind of a special concoction that we came up with that helps to make it easy to ferment these sugar bases.
Nice. Has it been? Has other like you said, the brewer that changed their mind in real time, but there's been products since this that have come out.
Yeah, it's been pretty, like we just launched it last month, but it's been pretty popular so far.
Oh, okay. So this was probably the trial then. This one was the trial.
This is from the trial. So GLB. This is they were one of the breweries that we trialed it with. So we always trial our ideas with breweries before we go to market with them.
Gotcha. And it worked well. So you're like, all right, let's get this bad.
I mean, this is super funny because like, we trial new strains, stuff that I always think is really interesting, but the product that has had the most rave reviews in our testing process has been this seltzer nutrient. Like everyone has come back saying it did exactly what you said it would. So I can't say that for all of the yeast strains that I develop, but I can say that for this seltzer nutrient.
That's awesome. That's really fun. I didn't realize that's how this sort of goes. Like it's and the base for this is just like a light malt. Is that what it is?
No, it's like water or sugar.
It can be sugar.
What?
I mean, like, yeah, there's depends on where you are and like how close you want to play by the rules. But I know for a brewery, it has to be grain based, but that means you can still use corn sugar, for example.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So if they use that, they guess around the rules, and then you can use this other yeast to sort of keep it going.
Yeah. And in some places you might have to put a little bit of malt, right? But
or like sorghum extract can be a touch tool, make it keep it gluten free. For beer licensing, legal wise, like you might see people add like a token hop just to say there's hops in it.
Gotcha. So you just put something in, and you're good to go.
Yeah,
that's pretty dope. Like, yeah, I like that. Like, I don't know, this trend seemed to have chilled out a little bit. I think like people aren't really pushing these out like they were during COVID.
No,
They're here
just
and there.
like just the small few that take them really seriously, like
Willibald.
Willibald or whatnot. But like
Yeah.
they're kind of an exception because their distillery side is a whole separate branch of their business.
And Willibald has an advantage because they can make neutral spirit that tastes good because they have a distillery. So like the Willibald products are quite nice, but they're able to control that quality, right?
Yeah,
it kind of speaks to the skill set that's necessary, necessary for for spirit based seltzers.
Yeah, I like it. This is fun. I like that they use. I feel like the hibiscus as well. I don't think this color hasn't dropped. This is like popping, like a bright red.
Oh yeah,
which is super fun. One of the things we were just talking about off air on a quick sort of tangent from this of doing yeast to do different things. So one of the collaborations we're doing for our anniversary is with a cafe called Found Coffee. They have about to open their 4th location in Toronto, and they have one in Guelph. And they have a roastery in Guelph, and the owner is Australian. So I connected with him on this Aussies in Toronto craft beer, just Facebook group. Sorry. Bought a case of Vegemite off him last year because he brought in a pallet of it. And he mentioned that he got this letter from like the whatever the board is. Do you remember the name of it? Like the Canadian Food Industry thing or something?
CFIA?
Yeah. The Food Inspection Agency.
There you go. The FDA of
I heard
Canada.
the story, yeah.
Yeah, so he told me last year, he's like, yeah, they're kind of like busting my balls about it and saying that it's got this added vitamins. And I was like, but Marmite is still on the shelves, and they're not busting the balls of anyone selling it on Amazon. It's just him they're cracking down because he serves it in the store. And to me, there's no other Australian cafes that I'm aware of that, like, because in Quebec, I used to live right in Montreal. I lived right behind this place that sold a bunch of Aussie, Kiwi, British snacks, as well as like fresh pies and everything, because one of the owners is an Aussie guy. So I was used to getting it there. I moved out here and I was like, fuck, where am I going to get my shit from, dude? So he had Vegemite. So I was like, sweet. At the very least, if I can't get all the other fun snacks, I could just get Vegemite. I'm okay. I'll figure the rest out. So then basically that has got worse and worse, and they've ordered him to destroy. He has like an $8,000 pallet worth of Vegemite. And he just had an operation. He's in hospital right now. He has spina bifida, so he had an operation, and he's basically pushing for this fight because I think he gets a $250,000 fine if he doesn't do it, which is bonkers. And the same vitamins are in many other Canadian products like flour, like vitamin-enriched flour, like baking flour and things like that. So it's completely like they're just picking on this one small business. And I don't know what he did, but we've been talking for a while that whatever the fuck he did, I don't know if he got a publicist or something, but he is on, like, I had my aunt, my mom in Australia message me about it. He's going crazy. He's on all the mainstream news. It came to the Prime Minister of Australia. He was having like a press conference thing and someone asked him about it. And he was sort of like tongue in cheek, like, I stand with the cafe owner in Canada. Like, I'm pro Vegemite, so like it's caused a problem because it's like,
there was a whole story on CBC and like it was all over the place. It's
great. I'm so proud of him. It's so amazing. But it's like, I think people like might laugh at it and it's funny, but it's like if someone started fucking with maple syrup and being like, oh, this Australian, this Canadian, I'm like, it's that. I eat it I've had it my whole life. If someone fucks with Vegemite, that feels like a personal attack. So I feel what he's going through. And off air, you guys mentioned briefly, what is Vegemite? It's a yeast spread. What do you do? Yeah. So are we going to have a Canadian-made Vegemite competitor that's going to be able to service the market that this CFIA is, depriving us of? What's
in this new insulated environment, you never know, right? Yeah, my understanding is that they were, they kind of got slapped because it has added vitamins, and I didn't know this, but apparently in Canada, there's like a limited number of foods that you're allowed to add vitamins to. It's like flour and cereal and energy drinks, but like, which is so stupid because it's so like, dumb. I'm sorry, but like, it's
incredibly arbitrary.
I understand why you might want to control that, but at the same time, like, the vitamins that are being added are not dangerous by any means.
Far from it, and the volume
kind of bonkers. So like, we just have this arbitrary rule that says you can't add vitamins to yeast spread. What's kind of crazy though is we grow yeast in Canada. Well, we grow yeast. We're in Canada. There's nothing that stops us from putting vitamins in the yeast we make when we produce it as a food for the yeast. There's
So it
vitamins in the
says-
malt.
Huh.
So like
So
it's
equally-
totally possible to produce, just not with the like formulation that I suppose Vegemite has. But the whole thing is dumb. It's
It's so dumb.
It's,
And they're
it's
picking
a
one spread
nutritious
over.
food.
Yeah.
It's kind of bonkers, but I guess we have, just like the Germans, we have these like arbitrary rules, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Honestly,
but this is also
sorry, brother. Go
this
for
is
it.
also why people stop respecting, regulatory institutions. They pick a stupid fight, and everyone starts looking at thinks the other rules are also stupid.
Yeah. But yeah, to answer your question, we totally
Yes.
could do it. We actually do. For the brewers, we do make a hot sauce, and we make something that's kind of Vegemite adjacent that goes into that to add umami. So we break down yeast with enzymes and make this kind of like umami extract from dead yeast. Which if you boil that down into a paste, that's Marmite, that's Vegemite.
Do you think
Vegemite has some added flavors as well,
Okay.
like some some vegetables
Salt,
too.
celery, onion extracts.
Yeah. But
Oh.
yeast is doing the heavy lifting there.
which is always what I thought. I wonder if is it like that could even be a video I could come by in Guelph. I'm not far. And we could do a little film a video, do a little if we could make a paste and do a little taste side by side.
Let's do
Oh,
it.
we could do this.
I've got like 20
I would
liters of
love
that
that.
ferment downstairs. We can boil it down. We'll make it.
Oh, dude, honestly, that would be because I've got 11 jars left of Vegemite, so I could bring one, and we could. They're very valuable, obviously, because now I'm fucked. But I'd love to do a side by side. We could do get some nice toast.
Yeah, like what I'm hearing is that there's some some opportunity for us to serve the Australian market.
And I feel like Escarpment of the Canadians that are going to step up.
The Commonwealth got to stick together.
That's what we all got the Queen on our money. I'm Canadian too, but I'm the same. They're my people. You guys are my people, so we're all part of it. I think that would be like a really fun, flip of the whole situation, and
This is a Canada strong and proud story. I like this.
Yeah, and I always felt Australia, I always called it like a nanny state. There were so many ridiculous rules that are just absolutely bonkers. And I came here and I felt a lot of things were better. And now I'm seeing that the red tape, like you're saying, Nate, obviously red tape's there for a reason, but I think then bureaucrats try to keep their job and then make more rules that make no sense, and then hire more people to maintain those rules that make no sense, and then multiply that by 100 years, and then boom, we have a bloated system that regulates things that make no sense and stops businesses opening axe throwing venues next to Fairweather for no reason and try to charge them $100,000 to change the fucking rules. It's so ridiculous. It's so
I was
obscene.
talking about that a few days ago by them.
Bro, yeah, they did this really crazy post on Reddit, and I found out it was the one next to Fairweather. Ram was telling me, and I was just like, oh my, and they just screwed these people over. They had their whole dreams, because they changed the usage, and you want to charge six figures for that when they're all in this economy, and then they had to shut it down, and it's just bro, it's just it's anti-human at this point, how much they're stopping people doing stuff, and the stories we hear from our brewery friends and guests on the pod, it's just. It's horrendous. It's nonsensical.
This is years ago. This is when I was still working at Grand River. I didn't know what I didn't know at this point. Before we get into this, without getting into the weeds, our government has radically expanded. 40% since COVID started, or something like that, is increasing government employees.
40?
Oh yeah, don't quote me on that, but it's a significant increase. I remember we had an AGC. No, it was an AGC rep, it was the AGCO rep, I believe. Alcohol Gaming Commission of Ontario rep came in. And we had our bright tank, so it just was another tank that, we carbonate the beer in and all that stuff. And we got the tank from the States, and it was all rated in gallons on the side of it. So we're thinking, okay, this is the imperial tank. Someone came by and said, yeah, you have to convert this into liters. You have to have liters, hectoliters at least, onto this tank. This is how we determine taxation for you. So we do all the different calculations. We get the guy in, he pressurizes the whole thing, he calibrates it for hectoliters, all good. 2 months later, an AGCO rep comes in, looks at the tank, and goes why is your tank in hectoliters? It has to be in gallons and barrels. It's no. We just paid money to not to switch it away from that. Like, no, it has to be in gallons and barrels. Like, we're not paying for this. We're not. And so eventually so someone paid, I don't know who was above my pay grade at the time, but someone paid to have a tank in both hectoliters and gallons, or hectoliters and barrels on the same tank. Brewery in Bruce County now has the tank. I laugh at it every single time I drive past the brewery. But yeah, like, it was just the government didn't know what they wanted or what was supposed to be on the thing. It's not new.
Within the same department. Gosh, that is so
Yeah.
insane. It's just infuriating. I just don't like. I feel like it's anti-human at the point where they just stop people from doing stuff. Like I was at a brewery last year, and dude was like, "It's like, see them permits on the wall is relatively new," and he was like, "That's like less than half of them." And he was telling me the story of how the default answer is no, so you have to call the guy to call this one and call that one, and then like no one's giving you the answer, so you got to read the whole whatever, all the what's the thing, the code, and you got to go according to section 13 AIX. It actually says this, and then they don't apologize when they say no, they just give you the thing up, but you have to do all the work, and no one's there to help you do stuff. I'm like, this doesn't seem like a society to me. This seems like just like a bureaucracy that's meant to do it. And I know, like, I don't like it because we know these people who are hardworking and they put their, you guys know them too. They're your clients. Like they put, just like you do, you guys have put money up to do your thing, and you're just trying to fucking make things cool, man. You're just going to produce a product and deliver it and make it safe. Obviously, no one wants to hurt anybody, so regulations are absolutely required. But it's just got to the point where it's just like it's untenable. I'm like, I don't know. I really don't like hearing it. It's very upsetting.
Our landlord's been trying to do an expansion on the building that we're in, which we're very pro. We're very pro. For at least 2 years, he's getting run around by different entities for different audits and all sorts of different stuff. They're asking him to re-engineer the sprinkler water lines in our building in order for him to do the new expansion of the facility. It's yeah.
So
when I talk to,
but I hear you.
Totally off topic. My girlfriend built a bar last year, and like the process of being able to open a place that sells alcohol in Ontario is absolutely bonkers,
insanity.
And like I would talk to friends in Europe, which we think of as the nanny state, and they're like, "You have to do what? You can't just open the bar?" Like it's kind of crazy. Like Canada is crazy for this stuff.
Yeah,
it's such a shame.
They came in just for that one in particular. They came in, and the two units are attached to each other. In order for her place to open, we had to install new drywall on the ceiling. There was already drywall there. It just wasn't their exact right specification they desired.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So it's like a matter of millimeters thicker. Then you're like, cool, I got to rip this out for $1,000 and then redo it and then repaint it.
Yeah, it was a mess. But we got it done. Got it done. It was just...
Yeah, you do. But it's like, come on, dude. Like when
you get a lot of respect for all the breweries that have been through all this crap too, right? Like
because it's alcohol.
Yeah,
like you said, alcohol. It's like normal things, then alcohol, and everything. And all of that to say, one thing that can fix it is if Escarpment Labs made Vegemite. So I feel like
exactly.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I feel like that could re-energize the Australian community. I love it. It's possible. Okay, we honestly need to talk about that, like dead ass. Like it'd be so fun to do that side by side and to see if there's some way to sort of like spice it up and make it like taste at least sort of somewhat similar. Because I've done side by side with Marmite and this other one called Promite that my store in Montreal had one time when they were out of Vegemite, and fuck, that's terrible. So not all yeast spreads are the same. I have a jar of Marmite here actually that was my girlfriend's family. Most of them are from England. They brought some over, her grandma, because I don't think she knew the vibes that I'm team Vegemite obviously, but it's cool it'd be fun to do like a side by side. You have those two, then you can see the differences in the spreads. They're very they're very unique. A lot of people don't like it because they don't eat it right, so you gotta have that shit right. God damn it.
Yeah, it's gotta be sparing.
Sparing, very hot toast, lots of butter. That's the move. Making me hungry right now. This has been great. Is there anything else we want to touch on that we didn't hit tonight? Because I feel like these beers were like a really cool talking points for all the different things that we wanted to get into. as far as that, was there anything else that we missed that we talked about earlier?
I think the
covered a
only other
lot.
thing that I just wanted to touch on is just highlighting some of the just on the topic of the trade wars and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Highlight some of the all Canadian collab beers that are coming out too, because I think that's really important.
Yes.
You have
Thank you.
Dominion City pushing the Glorious and Free. You have True History's Canadian Pilsner project. Just really cool to see that, and have breweries from the grassroots highlighting Canadian ingredients. That's been really awesome to see.
And both of them are, I know we've sort of arranged conversations with both those guys coming up to talk about it, but we haven't done that yet. So I believe they're both just all focused on Canadian. One, obviously, True Histories is about Pilsner specifically, and Dominion Cities is anything that's Canadian. Is that right?
I think it's mainly an IPA for the Dominion City one, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the intention is like
variants.
a hazy IPA because it's like using a hazy yeast. They do specifically mention our Foggy London strain, which is awesome.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I know Town's version was a West Coast, so it seems like they're taking some creative license with it, but the idea still being all Canadian ingredients, no matter which direction of IPA you go in.
Yeah, that's the intention for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think those are like, I guess, really great. I mean, they came into right at the time. I guess that's how they were conceived. It was at the time when all of this stuff, was going down, and like that sort of buying local pride was at a high. And it seems people still seem pretty psyched on that. It was something that I'm not sure if you feel it in Ottawa as much, Nate, but in Montreal or in Quebec in general, that's where I learned more about Quebec, and a little bit in Vermont too. Just like people were like just incredibly proud and sort of focused on buying local. Everything was always like made in Quebec everywhere. And you're like, all right, sweet, okay. Or you went to a restaurant in Vermont, they're like, the beef is from this farm 5 miles down the road here, and then the cheese is from this farm. I was like, oh fuck, this is dope. Like,
Nice.
and it really got my girlfriend and I in that headspace. So when we moved back to Hamilton here, like, we only shop very hyper local cafes and butchers and fish shops and all the different places where we produce, where we get stuff is very targeted for local. So it's cool to see on the beer side. Obviously, people are going to be on the consumer side shopping at breweries in their community or that are Canadian or whatever, and then from the brewery side, they are pushing that message. They're propping up companies like Escarpment and their local, like Barnell malts or something like that, or and then their local hop farms and all that type of stuff, and really like leveraging the local ingredients. It's very cool.
Yeah.
And I think you might see innovation come from it too. I mean, I think circling back on what we were talking about earlier with arbitrary German rules 500 years ago, like restriction can create innovation. Sometimes it's not great to have access to every ingredient under the sun. Maybe we're going to see innovation come out from this constraint of using only Canadian ingredients.
That is such a good point.
Great point.
We might see the rebirth of the Canadian Pale Ale.
Yeah. Was that a thing from somewhere?
People have tried to make the Canadian Pale Ale, the Ontario Pale Ale beer style for at least a decade or so. So maybe we'll actually see someone go around it.
Was there anything that stood out? Just to jog my memory, because I don't recall.
Crystal malt.
Yeah, that's it.
Crystal malt in general.
OG Tank House from Mill Street.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that shit was fire. The OG Tank House was great. Yeah. And I guess they watered it down a lot, I guess, obviously, as it goes. Okay. Yeah, like I'm not against that at all. Like, fuck it, why not, man? Like,
even like Great Lakes Canuck. Like
I was gonna say Canuck was the one.
Canuck definitely became kind of its own thing, but it's also also still kind of the bones of the Ontario Pale Ale.
Right.
Like Canuck and Naughty Neighbor are kind of that dry, pale, old school hops. Like not old school hops, but Citra Mosaic.
Oh, like some of the sea hops from the North Pacific Northwest type stuff. Yeah. Okay, I'm like, fuck, man. If that's what comes out of all of this, like, hell yeah. Like, I don't see a problem with that. Like, brings that shit back. Obviously, it was stuff we were drinking back in the day quite a lot, and before things changed and haze took over or whatever. But like, if that's the innovation that's going to come from, yeah, that's a really good point though, because a lot of stuff when you're like, even if you look at like African American like soul food, like all of that was from restriction. It was like, hey, all we have access to is a tail of an ox and fucking whatever collard greens and some black eyed peas and stuff like that, and they made these fire ass dishes that people now want because they didn't have much to work with. They just made the best of what they could. And then and I guess that's with a lot of different cuisines and sort of like around the world if you look at food. So yeah, you're right on that point. So I guess it's definitely going to be interesting.
I would love to see this. I don't think this will happen, but I can wish if this causes the return of the stubby or the standard bottle, if we drop aluminum cans and go back to glass bottles, which the financial pressures might require that.
That could be the move.
Yeah, I know we're just going full circle. We're going back to crystal malt and growlers, baby.
Oh my god,
exactly.
2009 all over again. Yeah,
what a time to be alive.
Woo. I know Town did those stubbies for a little bit, and they flew. Apparently, they just went like total. I wonder. I don't know how practical that was. I forgot to ask Jeff. Like, is it like it was probably a bitch to package, so it's probably not even like who even has a bottle of these days.
Yeah, really.
I think drinking beer from a glass bottle is a way nicer experience than drinking beer from a can.
For sure.
To be
like
honest.
If you have a nice little steam whistle from that green bottle.
Yeah.
We had them on the pod recently, and we were drinking that from there. I'm like, fuck.
Yeah, that was actually kind of special, and like I hadn't done that in quite some time.
Yeah, because you always think about sometimes it gets skunked or whatever because you're worried about. But I think because now they put them, they package them fresh and they put it straight in like the cardboard, like the 12 packs or whatever.
Yep.
So they're pretty covered up and they can avoid any of the problems. And there's just something about it when they're just crisp and fresh and you just fucking throwing them back and don't have to think about it too much. Yeah.
And they just kind of go back like nothing.
Yeah, it's like, and if you've got like the twist tops, they have the ridges, and the ridges make it a little bit not as nice. But when it's like the pop top and they got that smooth edge,
pop off glass bottle, it's the best. Straight from the vessel drinking experience, easily.
And because we don't really do it anymore because we're so big on glassware, and obviously glassware is fire. And it's like
it's also like the LCBO and other institutions, like they wanted it. Like you can fit a lot more of these on a store shelf than you can glass bottles. And you look at the transportation costs associated with glass when it comes to cleaning, recycling, all that stuff. It's
weight.
It is a bit higher. Now, Canada, we're in a weird situation. We don't have any domestic can manufacturing currently.
But we have all the aluminium product. Don't we have the raw materials, right?
Just like how we have tons of oil in Alberta, but we don't have much refining capacity in Canada. So it's the same idea.
Gotcha. So I guess that's
two are neighbor to the same.
Yeah. What about glass? Do we make glass bottles here?
Yep, I believe so. Yeah, at least we know we used to.
Okay.
Yeah, Quebec, they make a shitload.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think Steam Whistle said, Nate, you might correct me. I think they said they get the green bottles from Europe or something. Is that correct?
That's what that sounds right.
Yeah, which is
there might be limitations on specific bottles.
Because obviously it'd be a lot cheaper if they could get it from Quebec than out there.
Yeah.
I seem to recall Sleeman having a Quebec manufacturer for their clear glass bottles.
And we still have returnable bottles here in Ontario too, which I think is really cool, and it is a very uncool thing, but the big breweries do have this bottle return program that's like very effective, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Even when I lived in Montreal, because I lived in Toronto first, I couldn't get past the taking the beers back. So I used to rent a car and drive to Hawkesbury, just over the border, to go to the beer store to bring them back because the Quebec return system was way too complicated. Like if you didn't buy it there, they wouldn't take it back. Like, because you'd have to go to a supermarket, and they had these it was like a vending machine, like a Coke machine.
Yes.
And you have to go and scan the label, and if you didn't buy it there, which most of the beers I got were from all over, they didn't take it. So I would just collect them and then rent a car, chuck them in the car, and drive it. And even the amount of money I would get would essentially pay for the car, so it was redundant. But it was more just on principle. I just couldn't I couldn't deal. Even to this day, I'm looking at my empty bags right now. My least favorite chore is taking them shits back. But I can't not even. I don't care how much money I'm making. Like I could be making $1 million a month, and I'm still probably going to take it back to get $40 because I just can't get past it. It just annoys me because I'm just no. That's like I don't have cash. Who has cash? But now I have cash in my wallet because I go to the beer store and you get whatever little thing. I'm like, sweet. That's the only time I ever have money. It's so I mean cash money like on me. So it's like, yeah, I love that they do that. I think it's a great program. And apparently it was because Ontarians refused to recycle things properly, so they had to incentivize people. That's what I was told. Is that true?
That sounds like Ontario. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds.
Money talks, baby.
If that is true, I would believe it.
Yes.
Like that
Okay.
sounds like something that's correct.
I felt the same way when I heard it. I was like, yeah, that checks out. You know, I'm down with that.
Like I don't know if that's true, but I believe it.
It sounds plausible.
But it's cool. It is cool. At least it makes people sort of bring it back. I worked at the beer store 21 years ago when I lived here for the first time. The shit that people brought back, they would bring back beers with fucking like liquid in the bottom and cigarette butts in them. And you got to take them out. Like I wash my stuff out and take it back. But these like people were animals, Doug, like so bad. And then they make you so bad. Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to visit the BAT facility in London, Ontario a handful of times, and that facility is amazing. One of the things that's always kind of the highlight of the tour is this massive bottle washer, where it's I want to say it's like 60 or 100 or so heads, like rotary. No, so that's a batch bottle fit cleaner, and it's very cool. Anyway, they have this trap at one part of it where it's all the chemicals are being used to clean it, and it's just cigarette butts. It's just this amalgam.
Yeah, they got a dart hopper. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just all these cigarette butts that were in the bottles, just all soaking in wet caustic coming out of the bottles. It's gross. Foul.
But why? So that means they're getting those bottles back with all the cigarette butts in them. So that means people think it's cool to bring that back to the beer store to then.
Absolutely.
Well, man, you saw it.
I did, but I was like,
and Labatt is so good that they can wash those bottles, and you'll never know.
Never even know.
Yeah.
Like
I thought I had to drain it, you'll never know.
Yeah. I just remember I thought I had to drain them because back then, this was 2004. It was like 90% bottles. It wasn't many cans. People would bring them back. Unless it was like some of those like weird malt liquor type of joints. But most of them were just like you bring them back in the same case box and then you return it, get the money and put that towards the next case or whatever. Some dudes would come in with a dolly full or whatever the fuck. Gross. I forgot about all that shit. It's so disgusting. Anyways, okay, sick. So this is great, guys. This has been really informative. This is entertaining as hell. I really hope people learn stuff because I feel like I learned a lot from this as far as different things about yeast. Yeah, man, go.
There's one thing that's just kind of the plug on that just strictly a yeast thing. If people do want to learn more about yeast, we have a bunch of different videos on YouTube. If you want to kind of your basics for it, we have a 4-part series called Yeast Basics. If you want to really dive into just what makes yeast cells tick for fermentation, how do they operate, how do they function, how to think about them, how to relate to them. We have a 4-part series on that. We have a bunch of information either on YouTube or if you Google Escarpment Labs knowledge base, you can find all of the information we have regarding blog posts and kind of more niche topics we don't have video content on. If there's any questions as well that aren't there, just reach out to us. We're pretty easy to get a hold of. You can email us, go to our website, fill out contact form. We can help you out. We're here to help the brewers of Canada.
I love that. And on Instagram as well, is it like at Escarpment Labs? I'm pretty sure.
You got it. Yep. Escarpment Labs.
At escarpmentlabs.com for the website. Okay, there you go. That's the way to do it. God damn it! So people can reach out. You beat me to it because that's always my question. So thank you, Nate. Yeah, boys, this is awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Stick around at the end. We'll finish up off air. But so everyone, go follow at Escarpment Labs. Check out escarpmentlabs.com. Watch the YouTube videos. Give them a shout. If you're a brewer and you're looking for a local supplier, I mean, we just spoke for 2 hours and 40 odd minutes, so I kind of feel like you know where to go. So love it, guys.
Get that Canadian yeast.
Get that
Exactly.
Canadian yeast. God damn it. Thank you again, guys. Everybody, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you enjoyed the episode, smash the thumbs up, hit subscribe below, hit that notification bell. Nathaniel,
Ding.
so you know when the new drops. Follow us everywhere at BAOS Podcast, at Nathan Does Beer. Check out the long form audio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that. Give us 5 stars if you can. That would be glorious. Not for us, but for Nate and Richard, for their incredible yeast focused knowledge and their future escarpment might that we're going to have. God damn it, which I'm very excited about. Guys, we'll see you in the next one. Peace, y'all. Cheers.
Cheers.